Chapter 905. This is an enslavement seal that can control your soul. From now on you must obey my orders unconditionally. Otherwise I can kill you with just a thought. Qin Feiyong was too lazy to say more and only explained a little. But even just a few words were enough to make the commander of the Kirin army despair. Mu Qing and Yigleo's pupils also shrank slightly, looking quite wary. Qin Feiyong then looked at Wan Qiu. Wan Qiu's body and mind trembled. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "I was just joking. Don't take it seriously." Joking? Qin Feiyong's lips curled slightly. Yes, I was really joking. You are so powerful and talented. How would I dare to go against you? Wan Qiu nodded, his face full of flattery. He was like a mangy dog, wagging its tail in front of its master. Do you know how disappointed I am with your current performance? After all, you were once my #1 enemy. While I wanted to kill you, I also respected you. But I didn't expect you to be such a coward. Qin Feiyong shook his head and sighed deeply. These words came from the bottom of his heart, without the slightest pretense. Thinking back to the 9 underworlds, Wan Qiu was such a powerful person. But since entering the divine palace, he had changed. Fawning over the powerful, cowardly and incompetent. He had no backbone or pride at all. The current Wan Qiu was no longer worthy of being his enemy. And hearing Qin Feiyong's words, Wan Qiu fell silent, with a sadness that could not be dissolved in his heart. Backbone, pride, dignity, who didn't want these things? But the world was like this. In the face of great power and influence, these so-called pride were like dead wood, unable to withstand a single blow. If he wanted to live, he had to abandon these, even if he was unwilling. In the end, Wan Qiu closed his eyes and murmured, "Kill me. I only ask that you give me a quick death." Qin Feiyong raised his arm. Battle chi surged from his fingertips and a destructive wave spread out. Wait! Mu Qing suddenly reached out to stop Qin Feiyong. She looked at Wan Qiu and said with a smile, "I think we can keep him." Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. Think about it. If it were someone else, would he be able to make the daughter of the Kirin army fall in love with him? Mu Qing asked. Qin Feiyong froze for a moment, then shook his head. That's right. He still has his redeeming qualities, Mu Qing said. In your opinion, this is his redeeming qualities. But in my opinion, he is just trying to cling to the powerful, which is a sign of incompetence. Qin Feiyong said expressionlessly. Battle chi gushed out from his fingertips and swept toward Wan Qiu's eyebrows like lightning. Seeing this, Mu Qing raised her eyebrows and looked a little pale. Then she secretly winked at Yigleo. Yigleo immediately raised his old arm and waved it gently. The battle chi that was about to enter Wan Qiu's eyebrows disintegrated in an instant. Qin Feiyong suddenly turned his head and looked at the two of them. His eyes were quite sharp. But the two of them ignored him. Mu Qing looked at Wan Qiu and said lightly, "You can go. But remember what you should say and what you shouldn't say." Wan Qiu opened his eyes and stared at Mu Qing in disbelief. "If you don't go, I'll regret it." Mu Qing frowned. "Thank you." Wan Qiu bowed and thanked her. Then he glanced at Qin Feiyong, who looked as gloomy as still water. Then he quickly opened a portal and ran in without looking back. Qin Feiyong glanced at Wan Qiu's back and looked at Mu Qing gloomily. "Do you know the consequences of doing this?" "Don't worry. He definitely won't leak our information," Mu Qing said confidently. "That'd better be the case. Otherwise, not only him, but also you won't have it easy," Qin Feiyong said word by word. His eyes were full of coldness. "Watch your words," Yigleo said in a slightly unfriendly tone. "Don't act like an old man in front of me. If you piss me off, I'll still destroy your Mu family." Qin Feiyong looked at Old Yi and didn't avoid his gaze. The corner of his mouth also curved into a cold smile. "Destroy my Mu family? Haha. Young man, this old man will give you a piece of advice. Don't be too arrogant." Yigleo smiled faintly, but his eyes were full of coldness. Haha, Qin Feiyong couldn't help but laugh. "Old man, this junior will also give you a piece of advice. When you're old, don't go out and walk around. The road outside is not easy. If you're not careful, you might fall." Qin Feiyong said meaningfully. Then he didn't look at Yigleo again. He took out a spirit sea pill and threw it to the commander of the Kirin army. The commander of the Kirin army caught the spirit sea pill and looked at the three of them meaningfully. Then he put the spirit sea pill into his mouth. As the commander of the Kirin army, he was not stupid. From this conversation, he had already seen that the relationship between Qin Feiyang and the other two was not good. It seemed that the reason why this fake god helped Qin Feiyang was because the two of them had the same goal. But what was the purpose of these three people? Qin Feiyang frowned. He looked at the commander of the Kirin army and said, "Don't think about what you shouldn't think." "What?" The commander of the Kirin army was surprised. Qin Feiyang said, "After being controlled by the slave seal, no matter what you're thinking, I know it." "What?" The commander of the Kirin army was shocked. "Isn't this the same as taking off his clothes and standing in front of Qin Feiyang without any secrets? Hurry up and heal your wounds. We still have to go to the prison," Qin Feiyang said with a cold look in his eyes. Then he instantly disappeared without a trace. The three of them knew that he must have gone to the castle. Yiglao looked at the commander of the Kirin army and said, "Qinger, why are you helping Wan Xiu?" "It's not me who wants to help him. It's Lu Xingchen." Lu Xingchen saved Wan Xiu's life in the 9 underworlds, Mu Qing said secretly. Oldie nodded his head in realization and didn't say anything else. Inside the castle, the Spirit Serpent Emperor's Sea of Qi had been repaired. Now the double-winged snow eagle was helping it open the door of potential. The Spirit Serpent Emperor was also very excited. Qin Feiyang glanced at the Spirit Serpent Emperor and then looked at Fatso. He asked, "What do you think about this?" Lu Xingchen helped Wan Qiu before. Now that Mu Qing is helping him, there must be some secret. Fatso thought for a while and said, "Think so too." Qin Feiyang nodded. Also, how did Wan Qiu's cultivation improve so quickly? When you captured the commander of the Kirin army, Fat Lord had been thinking about this. In the end, he came to 2 unreasonable conclusions. Fatso said, "What conclusions?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and looked at Fatso expectantly. First, they might have obtained some great fortune. Second, they have also opened the door of potential. Fatso said. This? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He shook his head and said, "These 2 possibilities are not possible. First, everyone could not have obtained a great fortune at the same time. Second, no one knew better than him how difficult it was to open the door of potential. Without the help of pills, it was almost impossible. But in the Great Qin Empire, no one other than him knew how to refine these pills." Hearing Qin Feiyang's words, Fatso smiled bitterly. That's why Fat Lord said that these 2 conclusions are unreasonable. But immediately after, Fatso's expression turned solemn. However, if it was Mu Tianyang, then the second possibility is completely valid. Mu Tianyang. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. After being reminded by Fatso, he immediately remembered that Mu Tianyang was still alive, and he was hiding in the Great Qin Empire. We can't ignore this problem. Qin Feiyang muttered and looked at Fatso. Sneak into the temple immediately and ask Tan Wu and the others. I don't think you can get anything out of them, because if it was really Mu Tianyang, then these people must have become his subordinates. After all, no one is willing to nurture someone who is not loyal to them. And if this hypothesis is true, then Mu Tianyang must be planning a big conspiracy, Fatso said in a deep voice. One had to know that Tan Wu and the others were all geniuses of the 9 prefectures. Even in the imperial capital, they were one of the best. Moreover, their battle souls also had their own characteristics. It could be said that as long as the door of potential was opened, they could become an overlord in the future. If it's really as you said, then his plan must be to destroy the Great Qin Empire and rebuild the former Tianyang Empire. However, this is already within my expectations, Qin Feiyang said. I really hope he can fight with the current emperor soon. Fatso chuckled. What thoughts? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him. This was a typical case of wanting to see the world in chaos. Isn't Fat Lord's thoughts also your thoughts? Don't think that Fat Lord can't tell. Although you didn't say it on the surface, you actually have a lot of thoughts in your heart. Fatso glanced at Qin Feiyang in disdain, then sighed and said, Let's not talk nonsense. Whether there is a gain or not, we have to go to the Divine Palace this time. Where shall we meet later? Here, Qin Feiyang said. Okay. Fatso nodded. Qin Feiyang glanced at the Phantom Snake Emperor, then left the ancient castle with Fatso. Fatso immediately opened a portal and walked in. Seeing this, Mu Qing asked suspiciously, "Where is he going?" But Qin Feiyang just glanced at him indifferently, then looked at the commander of the Kirin army and said, "During the years I was away, did any potential pills appear in the imperial capital?" "No." The commander of the Kirin army shook his head. "Then are Lu Xingchen, Ren Wushuang, Dong Zhengyang, Shan Mei, my father, and my mother all in the divine prison?" Qin Feiyang said, "They are all here." The commander of the Kirin army nodded. Qin Feiyang clenched his fists. His eyebrows were filled with hostility as he asked, "You're the emperor's trusted aide. Do you know why he crippled my cultivation and banished me from the imperial capital back then?" Hearing this question, Mu Qing and Yiglao also looked at the commander of the Kirin army, because this was also what confused them. "I don't know. I guess no one knows about this except His Majesty and the state preceptor," the commander of the Kirin army said. "Humph. No matter how deep they hide, I will dig out the truth step by step." Chapter 906. Time flew by. Half an hour passed. The Kirin army commander Xi of Qi had finally recovered. He looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, "What do you want me to do now?" Qin Feiyang looked up at the night sky. There was still some time before dawn. He said, "Go to the penitentiary immediately." "No." However, Mu Qing stopped Qin Feiyang. "Why?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "Yiglao's divine power hasn't recovered yet. What if we are discovered by the emperor and the imperial advisor when we sneak into the penitentiary?" Mu Qing said. "Then what do you mean?" Qin Feiyang asked. "Let's wait for Yiglao to recover his divine power first. Even if we are discovered, we can immediately open the space-time gate and take us back to the Forgotten Continent," Mu Qing said. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while. In the end, for safety reasons, he accepted this suggestion. "Go back first and wait for my news. Remember, if you want to live, don't play tricks." Qin Feiyang looked at the Kirin army commander and said. The Kirin army commander nodded sadly. After establishing a contract with Qin Feiyang, he would open the space-time gate. "Also, now that you are my subordinate, there are some things that I need to tell you. Wan Qiu and your daughter are still meeting secretly. You are not the only one who doesn't like this person. I don't like him either. If there is a chance, kill him," Qin Feiyang said. His eyes flashed coldly. The Kirin army commander's body stiffened. He walked into the space-time gate without looking back. When the space-time gate disappeared, Mu Qing frowned and said, "You can't touch Wan Qiu? You think I can't touch him just because you say so? Who do you think I am? Your subordinate?" Qin Feiyang smiled disdainfully. He left the two behind and entered the castle. Mu Qing was quite angry. Yiglao glanced at the void where Qin Feiyang disappeared and sighed. "This Qin Feiyang is not someone you can control." "I know. Not just me. I'm afraid no one in this world can control him. But because of this, I hate him even more and want to kill him even more," Mu Qing thought to himself, his eyes filled with killing intent. Yiglao's eyes flickered. "He'll die when our plan succeeds." In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Over the past 3 days, the Phantom Serpent Emperor's potential had been completely unlocked, and its talent had soared. Qin Feiyang also managed to open the 6th floor with the help of the double-winged snow eagle. However, Fatso, who had sneaked into the temple, did not return, nor did he send any message. That morning, Qin Feiyang woke up from his closed-door training. His brows were tightly knitted. Soon, Lu Hong also opened her eyes and said worriedly, "It's been 3 days and Fatso still hasn't returned. Could something have happened?" "I don't think so. After all, Yiglao is here now. If something really happened, he would send a message to us for help." Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and shook his head. Then he got up and left the castle. He stood above the mountain range and looked down. Soon, he found Mu Qing on a mountain peak not far away. Both of them were sitting cross-legged on the ground, resting with their eyes closed. Whoosh! He took a step forward and landed beside the two of them. He asked, "Are you done?" "Almost." Yiglao opened his eyes and said. Mu Qing also opened her eyes. She got up and looked at Qin Feiyang. This time, Yiglao must go to the castle. Impossible, Qin Feiyong said flatly. Why are you so stubborn? If Yiglao doesn't go to the castle, who will help us if something happens to us in the divine prison? Mu Qing said angrily. Qin Feiyong said, he is a fake god. He must have other ways. But don't forget that the national preceptor is also a fake god. Mu Qing shouted. No way. Qin Feiyong shook his head. There was no room for negotiation. What a joke. All his important things and important people were in the castle. If he let Yiglao enter the castle, wouldn't it be tantamount to letting a wolf into the house? Mu Qing was unable to restrain her anger and was about to curse out loud. But at this moment, Yiglao reached out to stop Mu Qing and said with a faint smile, Qinger, don't force me. But Mu Qing's face was full of worry. It's okay. I can also hide my cultivation and enter the divine prison with the commander of the Kirin army. Yiglao waved his hand and said with a smile, that's the only way. Mu Qing sighed helplessly, then looked at Qin Feiyong and said coldly, you'd better not go too far. Too far? Qin Feiyong was so angry that he laughed. The castle was his. It was his freedom and his right to decide whether or not he wanted to enter the castle. How could this be considered overboard? He was too lazy to care about it. He took out the image crystal and sent a message to the commander of the Kirin army. In less than 10 breaths, the commander of the Kirin army came, looking more haggard than before. It seemed that he had suffered a lot in the past 3 days. Qin Feiyong said, we are going to disguise ourselves as your subordinates and sneak into the divine prison. What do you think? The commander of the Kirin army glanced at the 3 people and pointed to Yiglao. If he hides his cultivation and is not seen by the national preceptor, it should not be a big problem. But the 2 of you, both of you are only war masters. My Kirin army is not so weak. The commander of the Kirin army looked at Qin Feiyong awkwardly and said, if someone asks, you can just say that we entered the Qilin army because of your relationship, wouldn't that be enough? Mu Qing frowned. No. Everyone in the Kirin army must be a war saint. This is the rule set by His Majesty. After the commander of the Kirin army finished speaking, he looked at Qin Feiyong and said, if you have to disguise yourself as the Kirin army, you can barely do it. When someone asks, you can say that you have reached the peak of the 9 stars War Master and can break through at any time. Qin Feiyong nodded. The commander of the Kirin army looked at Mu Qing and shook his head. As for you, there is definitely no discussion. What kind of stupid rule is this? Mu Qing was incomparably annoyed. Qin Feiyong waved his hand and directly sent Mu Qing to the ancient castle. He was not worried about Mu Qing going to the ancient castle, because Mu Qing's strength was not as good as the double-winged snow eagle and wolf king. If he dared to act recklessly, he would definitely die miserably. At the same time, the commander of the Kirin army took out 2 sets of flame armor from his Qinkuan bag. Qin Feiyong and Yiglao quickly changed. Oldie also changed his appearance slightly and became younger than before. He also controlled his cultivation level to be a 1-star battle saint. After disguising, the 3 of them were ready to set off. But at this moment, Fatso came back with a relaxed expression and a ruddy face. Wow, boss, you are dressed well. So cool that no one has a friend. Seeing the flame armor on Qin Feiyong, Fatso's eyes lit up and ran over with a cheeky smile. Don't joke with me. Where have you been for the past 3 days? Qin Feiyong frowned and said, of course I went to have fun. Fatso chuckled. Qin Feiyong's face instantly darkened. Ahem. Seeing that the situation was not good, Fatso quickly coughed and transmitted his voice. I went to find Tan Wu and the others, but no one was willing to tell me. But they were quite happy to know that you are still alive. Then Fatso added, as for Feng Wuxia and the twin sisters, I did not go to them. After all, they have some grudges with us. If they know that you are back, they will definitely stir up trouble. Qin Feiyong could not help but reveal a look of disappointment. Don't be so quick to be disappointed. Although I did not pry open their mouths, I heard a very important piece of news from Sun Dahai. Fatso thought to himself. What news? Qin Feiyong's heart skipped a beat and asked. Of course he still remembered Sun Dahai, who was the steward of the treasure pavilion. He told me that not long after we left, a mysterious masked man also went to purchase the medicinal ingredients for the potential pill. Fatso said. What? Qin Feiyang's pupils constricted as he thought to himself. In that case, Mu Tianyang has already entered the capital. Definitely. Because only Mu Tianyang has the pill formula for the potential pill. And Sun Dahai also showed me the list left behind by that person when he purchased the medicinal ingredients. I found that there were even medicinal ingredients for the small creation pill and the 9-turn dragon blood pill. Fatso said. How many times has he appeared? Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. Not many. He only appears once a year. Fatso said. Could it be that the transformation of Tan Wu and the others is really related to Mu Tianyang? Qin Feiyang frowned. Suddenly, he realized a very serious problem and hurriedly said to himself, Sun Dahai also knows that I'm back? Don't worry, he won't talk nonsense. Because he said that the grudge between you and the Emperor is your family's matter. As a businessman, he can't meddle in it. Fatso laughed. That's good. Qin Feiyang heaved a sigh of relief, and then looked at Fatso suspiciously, and said to himself, it won't take 3 days to find out this information, right? Fat Lord went to purchase medicinal ingredients. The medicinal ingredients of the treasure pavilion in the major cities, including the treasure pavilion in the major cities outside the imperial city, have all been plundered by Fat Lord. The only regret is that I didn't find the dragon blood. Fatso laughed secretly. You're quite capable. Qin Feiyang was surprised. Of course. Fatty couldn't stop smiling proudly. Okay, don't be so smug. Hurry up and organize those medicinal ingredients. I'm going to the prison of gods right away. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at Fatso, and then sent Fatso to the castle. Oldie and the commander of the Qilin army could tell that the two of them were exchanging flirtatious glances. They were definitely discussing something in secret. But they were very tactful and didn't disturb them, nor did they ask any questions. Can we go now? The commander of the Qilin army asked. Qin Feiyang nodded. The commander of the Qilin army immediately opened a portal and took the lead to walk in with Yiglao. Phew. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and steadied his mind. Then he followed him in. Although he was born in the imperial palace, he had never been to the prison of gods. The imperial palace. Majestic palaces stood tall and magnificent, with dragons and phoenixes carved on them, showing a strong emperor's aura. In the deepest part of the imperial palace, there was a mountain ridge that was hundreds of meters tall. On the mountain ridge, there were no lush trees, only patches of green grass. It was like a green divine python lying prone on the ground. At the peak of the mountain, numerous guards were standing straight and upright. They were wearing flaming armor, with the symbol of a Kirin engraved on their chests, and held a halberd in their hands. Each of them was exuding a terrifying saint aura. That's right. They were the Kirin army of the imperial palace. This mountain ridge was the boundary between the imperial palace and the back mountain. The Kirin army was guarding this forbidden area. Behind the mountain ridge was a vast and boundless mountain range. The mountains overlapped each other, looking majestic and magnificent. Ancient trees towered from the ground to the sky. Vines were as vigorous as dragons. All kinds of ferocious beasts and birds were galloping and roaring in the mountain stream. There were saint beasts and even emperor beasts, and their terrifying aura shrouded the area. Chapter 907. Swish. Suddenly, 3 figures descended in the air in front of the mountain ridge at almost the same time. Who? The Kirin army immediately became vigilant. But when they saw that it was the commander of the Kirin army, they all bowed and saluted. The commander of the Kirin army asked, Have there been any abnormalities here in the past few days? No. One of them shook his head. The commander of the Kirin army said, Even so, we can't be careless. We must be careful. Yes, sir. A group of Kirin army bowed and replied. Then, the commander of the Kirin army turned into a stream of light and entered the forbidden area behind the mountain, flying deep into the forest. Qin Feiyang and Yiglao followed closely behind him. Huh. That person's cultivation, why is he only a 9-star war sect? Suddenly, one of the Kirin army looked at Qin Feiyang's back. His eyes filled with astonishment. What? The others were stunned, and they all raised their heads to look at Qin Feiyang. Was it really a 9-star war sect? Strange, how could a 9-star war sect enter our Kirin army? Someone whispered, his face full of suspicion. Are you stupid? This person must have something to do with the commander. That's right. It's not like there haven't been people who entered our Kirin army through the back door. And he's following beside the commander. Their relationship is definitely not shallow. So, when we have time, we have to go and curry favor with him. There is a need for that. A group of people were discussing in a low voice. As for the person involved, Qin Feiyang, he was galloping while looking at the mountains and rivers. His eyes were filled with curiosity. The commander of the Kirin army looked back at him and sighed. Do you have to make such a fuss with His Majesty? Qin Feiyang was stunned. His gaze instantly turned cold and said, It's not me who wants to make trouble, it's him. No matter what, you are still father and son. If you have anything to say, you can say it face to face. The commander of the Kirin army said. Back then, when I entered the imperial palace, I wanted him to give me an explanation, but did he give me one? If he had told me everything back then, I might have forgiven him. But now I can't. As for the father and son you mentioned, I would like to ask you, do you think this kind of relationship is reliable in the royal family? Qin Feiyang said. Alas! The commander of the Kirin army sighed. After serving the emperor for so many years, he naturally knew what kind of place the emperor family was. This is a world of power and desire. There were traps everywhere. Danger lurked everywhere. The slightest carelessness would cause one to fall into eternal damnation. What brotherly relationship? What father-son relationship? It was completely unreliable here. The only thing he could rely on was his fists and brains. Next, the two of them didn't talk about anything else. Several hundred breaths passed. Black fog suddenly appeared in front of them. The black fog covered an area of several dozen miles, drifting in the air with the wind. Before he even got close, Qin Feiyang felt an intense sense of danger. That black fog isn't an ordinary fog. It's called soul-devouring fog. It has a strong penetrating power and can easily penetrate into the sea of consciousness of living creatures and erode their souls. If one accidentally enters it, even I can't last more than 10 breaths. And the prison of God is right in the center of this black fog. The commander of the Kirin army said. As he spoke, he took out a golden token from his chest. The token was as big as a palm and seemed to be made of gold. A lifelike 5-clawed golden dragon was carved on it. Then, the commander of the Kirin army activated a trace of battle chi and infused it into the golden token. Buzz! Immediately, the golden token buzzed and vibrated. Rays of golden light emerged and formed a golden barrier around the commander of the Kirin army. Come in. Then the commander of the Kirin army said without turning his head. Qin Feiyang and Yiglao looked at each other and stepped into the golden barrier one after another. Immediately, they felt a terrifying aura of the emperor. Qin Feiyang asked, Did he make this by himself? Of course he was referring to the emperor. Yes. The commander of the Kirin army nodded. Qin Feiyang's face darkened. He didn't say anything. He looked up and scanned the front. Then his pupils shrank. He saw that the area covered by the black fog, whether it was the mountains or the earth, was dyed black. Moreover, he couldn't find a single ferocious beast or bird within his line of sight. Not even a blade of grass. It was completely bare. It gave people the feeling that they had come to a dark hell. Soon, led by the commander of the Kirin army, the three of them entered the black fog. The black fog seemed to have its own consciousness. The moment the three of them entered, it surged toward them but was blocked by the golden barrier. However, the black fog, was eroding the golden barrier, making a sizzling sound. Qin Feiyang looked at this scene and couldn't help but worry. Don't worry, this golden barrier can last for an hour, and the prison of God is just a dozen miles away. Can definitely hold on. The commander of the Kirin army said. Just as the commander of the Kirin army was speaking, Yiglao extended his hand out of the barrier and the black fog immediately rushed toward his hand. Qin Feiyang could clearly see that the black fog was rushing toward the pores of Yiglao's hand. A moment later, Yiglao retracted his arm and said, The corrosive power of this black fog is very strong. At least a 9-star war emperor can withstand it. What? Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. Only a 9-star war emperor could withstand it. Wasn't this too terrifying? At the same time, The commander of the Kirin army glanced at Yiglao, his eyes full of envy. A false god was indeed powerful. Like him, his cultivation wasn't very weak, but if he didn't have this token given by the emperor, he wouldn't dare to set foot in this place. Dozens of breaths passed. That's the prison of God. The commander of the Kirin army looked forward and said. Qin Feiyang immediately looked over and saw a huge mountain standing on the ground a few miles away. The mountain was tens of thousands of feet high and was completely black, towering into the clouds. From afar, it looked like an ancient ferocious beast lying in the black fog, releasing a cold aura. However, Qin Feiyang didn't see the so-called prison of God. Up there. The commander of the Kirin army pointed to the top of the mountain. Qin Feiyang looked over and his eyes suddenly burst out a bright light, like two bright moons. On the top of the mountain there was an ancient pagoda. The ancient pagoda was hundreds of feet high, and was completely black. It was surrounded by black fog and filled with a gloomy aura. Looking at the ancient pagoda, one would feel a deep sense of fear. However, Qin Feiyang was very excited, because he would be able to see his mother soon. You'd better control your emotions, because the guards of the prison of God are 2 9-star combat emperors. They have seen countless people, and if you're not careful, they will discover your flaws. The commander of the Kirin army noticed the change in Qin Feiyang's emotions and hurriedly sent a message to him. 2 9-star combat emperors. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled slightly and he quickly suppressed his emotions. Whoosh! The commander of the Kirin army glanced at him and saw that Qin Feiyang had calmed down. He then led the two of them to fly against the wind and towards the top of the mountain. On the top of the mountain there was a square that was about 100 feet wide. It was paved with a kind of black stone and was obviously there for many years. Whoosh! Dozens of breaths later, the three of them landed on the square. Opposite the square was the ancient pagoda. The ancient pagoda had a total of 10 floors. The door of the pagoda was closed and there was a tall stone tablet next to it. 2 bloody words were carved on the tablet. Prison of God. The 2 words seemed to be condensed from blood and emitted a shocking murderous aura. On both sides of the pagoda door, 2 old men in black robes sat on the ground like 2 death gods. Their eyes were closed and there was a cold indifference between their brows. The soul-devouring fog lingered around them but could not hurt them. Greetings to the 2 ancestors. The commander of the Kirin army looked at the 2 of them in fear and bowed. Qin Feiyang and Yiglao also bent down and lowered their heads with a respectful expression. What's the matter? One of them opened his eyes and looked at the commander of the Kirin army and asked. The commander of the Kirin army said, I want to interrogate Lu Xingchen and the others. The old man nodded and glanced at Qin Feiyang and Yiglao. He raised his eyebrows slightly and sized up Qin Feiyang for a moment before saying, He's just a 9-star war master? He's the child of a distant relative of mine. He came to me a few days ago and wanted to find a job in the imperial palace, so I let him enter the Kirin army. Although his current cultivation is only at the 9-star war master, he has already stepped into the peak of the 9-star war master, and will soon break through to the Battle Saint realm. The commander of the Kirin army's body and mind tightened as he hurriedly explained. The old man nodded and said expressionlessly, We don't want to care about this kind of thing, but you'd better restrain yourself. After all, this is the rule set by His Majesty. I know. I promise there won't be a next time. The commander of the Kirin army secretly heaved a sigh of relief and respectfully replied. It's good that you know. After the old man finished speaking, he raised his old hand and waved it gently. The tightly closed door of the pagoda slowly opened. Behind the pagoda door, there was a golden light curtain that sealed the entire pagoda door. The purpose of this light curtain was to block the soul-devouring fog. Go in, the old man said. Thank you, ancestor. The commander of the Kirin army bowed and thanked him, then walked towards the pagoda door. Qin Feiyang and the other 2 hurriedly followed. But just as Qin Feiyang passed by the old man suddenly asked, What's your name? Qin Feiyang's body stiffened. He hurriedly stopped and lowered his head in horror. Yiglao also stopped beside Qin Feiyang, glanced at Qin Feiyang, and then glanced at the old man without leaving a trace, a cold light flashing in the depths of his old eyes. If there were any accidents, he would definitely kill these 2. At the same time, The commander of the Kirin army was also a little flustered. He pretended to be calm and turned to look at Qin Feiyang, smiled and said, "Don't be afraid, answer the ancestor's question truthfully." Then he looked at the old man again and smiled apologetically. "Ancestor, this is the first time he has seen such a strong person like you, so he is a little scared. Don't take it to heart. That's too cowardly. The Kirin army can't have such a coward." The old man glanced at Qin Feiyang and said. The commander of the Kirin army nodded and said, "Yes, yes, yes, I will train him well." Then he looked at Qin Feiyang and shouted, "Hurry up and answer the ancestor's question." "No need to answer, go in." Chapter 908. Qin Feiyang and the other two passed through the golden light curtain and appeared in a dim corridor. The corridor stretched to the end of the other side. On both sides there was a stone door every 10 meters. Every stone door was tightly shut, and there was a number on each door. Boom! Just as Qin Feiyang was sizing up these stone doors, the pagoda doors behind him suddenly closed. Phew! That scared me to death. My heart almost jumped out of my chest when the patriarch asked for your name. The commander of the Kirin army patted his chest and turned to look at Qin Feiyang. His face was full of fear. Indeed, his question was too unexpected. Yiglao nodded. "One of you is a combat emperor and the other is a fake god. How can you be scared by this? You're too useless." Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them with disdain. "We're useless?" The two of them looked at each other with anger in their eyes. "Since you're so powerful, why do you look so scared?" The commander of the Kirin army said. "Can't you tell? I'm just faking it." Qin Feiyang sneered. The commander of the Kirin army was stunned. "If I appear too calm, then it will really be suspicious." Qin Feiyang glanced at him indifferently and then glanced at the stone doors on both sides of the corridor. "Heard about it." The commander of the Kirin army and Yiglao looked at each other with a hint of fear in their eyes. That person just now was a genuine 9-star combat emperor. If it were other young people, they would definitely be scared out of their wits. But this person was so calm. This kind of calm temperament really made people feel scared. Suddenly, the two of them felt a cold current appear again. The temperature here dropped sharply as if it was winter. The two of them looked at Qin Feiyang again. They found that Qin Feiyang's eyes had changed. There was a hint of killing intent in the coldness, like a pair of sharp eagle eyes. The cold current that appeared came from Qin Feiyang's body. "Which cell is my mother locked in?" Qin Feiyang asked in a bone-chilling voice. "The last cell," the commander of the Kirin army said. He led Qin Feiyang to the end of the corridor and stopped in front of the stone door on the left. "Open it," Qin Feiyang said hurriedly as he stared at the stone door. "You have to be mentally prepared." The commander of the Kirin army hesitated. Qin Feiyang nodded. The commander of the Qilin army held the golden token in his hand and faced the stone door of the prison cell. Whoosh! A beam of golden divine light shot out and entered the stone door. Boom! Boom! The stone door slowly. A terrifying wave of destructive energy surged out from the crack in the door. Crack! At the same time, deafening claps of thunder could be heard from behind the stone door. Through the crack, Qin Feiyang could clearly see that there was a sea of purple lightning inside. Without waiting for the stone door to open, Qin Feiyang impatiently rushed in. The scene of the entire cell entered his field of vision. The cell was about 100 zhang wide. There was nothing in it except for the purple lightning tribulation. The bolts of lightning filled every corner of the cell, emitting an apocalyptic aura. These lightning tribulations can even kill a 1-star combat emperor. "You just ran in here like that. Are you tired of living?" At the same time, seeing Qin Feiyang barge into the cell, Yiglao's expression changed drastically. He quickly ran in and shouted angrily. As he spoke, he waved his hand and a divine power barrier was formed, protecting Qin Feiyang. Rumble! Crack! The bolts of lightning struck the barrier ferociously, producing deafening booms. However, Qin Feiyang acted as if he didn't hear Yiglao's scolding. His gaze was fixed on the center of the cell. There, a white-clothed woman was sitting cross-legged. Looking at the white-clothed woman, Qin Feiyang's eyes became misty, blurring his vision. Wasn't that his mother? He remembered clearly. The last time he saw his mother, although she had already taken off her phoenix coronet and phoenix robe, losing her usual elegance, she was still in good spirits. But now, the very old white dress she was wearing had become extremely tattered. Her long black hair was now like straw, yellow and disheveled. Wrinkles began to appear on her youthful face. She looked old and her eyes were dim. She looked worse than a woman in her 40s or 50s. Qin Feiyong felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. Only a few years had passed and his mother had become like this? He could imagine how much pain his mother had gone through in the years he had left the imperial capital. However, the white-clothed woman didn't seem to notice Qin Feiyong's arrival. She didn't open her eyes. The bolts of tribulation lightning continued to strike her, ravaging her body and tormenting her mind. Alas! The commander of the Kirin army also entered the cell. Standing in the divine power barrier, he looked at the white-clothed woman and finally sighed deeply. He bowed and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." However, the white-clothed woman still didn't open her eyes, as if she didn't hear him. Her expression didn't change either. "Mother, it's me." Qin Feiyong walked forward step by step and said softly, "Don't." The white-clothed woman's body trembled and she finally opened her eyes. However, Qin Feiyong had changed his appearance. Looking at this unfamiliar face, the white-clothed woman quickly calmed down, and her eyes revealed a trace of indifference. "Mother, it's really me." Qin Feiyong quickly took out a face-restoring pill and stuffed it into his mouth. In the blink of an eye, his appearance was restored. Don't. The indifference in the white-clothed woman's eyes instantly melted. 2 drops of clear tears flowed from the corners of her eyes. Looking at the tears in the corners of his mother's eyes, Qin Feiyong's heart collapsed. He quickly ran over and knelt in front of his mother. He raised his hand and slapped his own face. He blamed himself and said, "Mother, I'm useless. I let you suffer here." The white-clothed woman quickly grabbed Qin Feiyong's wrist and shook her head. "Tian-er, don't blame yourself. It's not your fault, it's my fault. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't be trapped here and suffer the pain of the lightning tribulations." Qin Feiyong was so guilty that he wanted to kill himself in front of his mother to atone for his sins. "Silly child, as long as you can live well, it will be the greatest comfort for your mother." The white-clothed woman reached out and touched Qin Feiyong's face. Her eyes were full of love. Her slightly aged face seemed to have regained its youthfulness, becoming bright and beautiful. Her dim eyes were finally filled with color. "Mother." Qin Feiyong looked at the white-clothed woman. His heart was bleeding. Suddenly, he turned to look at the commander of the Kirin army and shouted, "What are you waiting for? Remove the lightning tribulations for me." The white-clothed woman was stunned. She raised her head and looked at the commander of the Kirin army. There was a trace of suspicion in her eyes. Qin Feiyong saw his mother's suspicion and said with a smile, "Mother, he is now under my control." "Under your control?" The white-clothed woman was surprised. "In the Forgotten Continent, I have mastered a secret technique that can enslave others. Now I can erase his soul with just a thought. Mother, you don't have to worry." Qin Feiyong said. "There's such a secret technique?" The white-clothed woman was shocked. "I will explain the details to you slowly after we leave the penitentiary," Qin Feiyong said with a smile. He turned to look at the commander of the Kirin army again and said angrily, "Didn't you hear what I said? It's not that I didn't hear it. It's that I can't do it. These lightning tribulations can only be removed by the 2 ancestors outside." The commander of the Kirin army was in a difficult position. Yiglao looked at the commander of the Kirin army and waved his hand. The divine power barrier suddenly expanded and covered the white-clothed woman. The white-clothed woman looked at Yiglao in surprise. "Thank you." Qin Feiyong looked at Yiglao and thanked him. Then, he looked at the commander of the Kirin army and said coldly, "Then you go and bring Lu Xingchen and the others to me, as well as the old man and Zhu Yu." "Okay." The commander of the Kirin army nodded and walked out of the divine power barrier. Although the lightning tribulations here were terrifying, the commander of the Kirin army could withstand them for a while. The white-clothed woman looked at Yiglao and asked, "Tanner, who is this?" Qin Feiyong smiled and said, "He's from the Forgotten Continent. This time I was able to come back and sneak into the god's prison thanks to his help." The white-clothed woman nodded and stood up with the help of Qin Feiyang. She bowed to Yiglao and said, "Thank you, Senior, for taking care of Tian." Although Yiglao controlled his cultivation to be at the level of a one-star battle saint, the divine power barrier exposed his true cultivation. "Thank him." A trace of displeasure crawled up Qin Feiyang's face as he said, "Mother, he and I only have a relationship of mutual benefit. There's no need to thank him." "Oh, you can't be so rude. Even if you're using each other, he's helping you now. You should thank him," the white-clothed woman said with a straight face. Qin Feiyang felt wronged. All these years the Mu family had harmed him a lot. Especially the Mu family's great ancestor and second ancestor. They had tried to kill him many times. Who would have thought that his mother would scold him now? Of course, he knew that his mother didn't know about these things, but he still felt uncomfortable. Yiglao glanced at Qin Feiyang and couldn't help but laugh. He then looked at the white-clothed woman and cupped his hands and said, "Madam, you're too polite." As little brother Qin Feiyang said, "We're indeed using each other. But if he could see the big picture like you, then there wouldn't be so many conflicts between us." "You're taking advantage of me?" Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and glared at Yiglao. Yiglao chuckled and fell silent again. Qin Feiyang glared at him and turned to look at his mother. He frowned and said, "All these years, father. Didn't he come to see you?" "No." The white-clothed woman shook her head and looked a little disappointed. "That heartless bastard. I'll make him pay the price sooner or later." Qin Feiyang was burning with anger. No matter what happened, they were still husband and wife. So what if he came to see her? "You can't say that. After all, he's your father." The white-clothed woman sighed. "He's so heartless and you're still speaking for him?" "He's not worthy to be my father. I don't want to be associated with him now." Chapter 909. Looking at Qin Feiyang's eyes and attitude, the white-clothed woman's expression was extremely complicated. She didn't know how to persuade him, because she knew that what the emperor had done these years had cast a great shadow in Qin Feiyang's heart. This shadow could not be erased for a lifetime. "Feiyang." Suddenly, a heavenly voice sounded behind Qin Feiyang. "Sister." Qin Feiyang's body trembled, and he hurriedly turned around to see a beautiful figure standing at the door. After not seeing each other for many years, Ren Wushuang was still so beautiful and moving. Even though at the moment her clothes were ragged and her hair was messy, it still could not hide her charm from head to toe. Yiglao once again activated his divine power, allowing the divine power barrier to envelop the entire cell. "Did you miss me?" With a cynical smile, Qin Feiyang walked towards Ren Wushuang. Then, Ren Wushuang flew over and smashed into Qin Feiyang's arms. Ren Wushuang's sudden behavior made Qin Feiyang somewhat at a loss. Because after being together for so long, it was the first time he had such intimate contact with Ren Wushuang. With this beauty in his arms, the delicate fragrance assailed his nostrils, making him unable to help but feel restless. "Who has time to miss you? Less narcissism," Ren Wushuang scolded. But her heart was unprecedentedly at ease, and her beautiful eyes were filled with a mist. Although she herself was in prison, she was most worried about Qin Feiyang. Because the imperial preceptor had told her that Qin Feiyang did not have a good life in the Forgotten Continent, and was hunted down all day. So, at this moment when she saw Qin Feiyang in person, her inner emotions could not be controlled. Qin Feiyang was stunned, and then his heart relaxed a lot. Although Ren Wushuang was very charming, he had always treated Ren Wushuang as his older sister. And Ren Wushuang, like him, must have simply regarded him as a younger brother. Between siblings, there was nothing wrong with having intimate contact once in a while. He raised his head and gently patted Ren Wushuang's shoulder. "Sis, I'm sorry for making you worry. If you know that I'm worried, why didn't you come back earlier?" Ren Wushuang scolded. Qin Feiyang sighed deeply and said, "I also wanted to come back earlier, but all right. Don't say any more. I know you're in trouble. As long as you're safe, it's fine." Ren Wushuang smiled and stood up from Qin Feiyang's arms. Looking at Qin Feiyang's face, her expression was full of concern. Qin Feiyang's heart warmed. He hurriedly turned around and pulled Ren Wushuang to his mother. "Mother, let me introduce you. Her name is Ren Wushuang. She's my sister in the spirit state." "Wushuang greets Auntie." Ren Wushuang also hurriedly bowed, appearing gentle and polite, decent and generous. Thank you for taking care of Tian in the spirit state. The woman in white grabbed Ren Wushuang's hand and said with a smile in her eyes, Auntie is too polite. Naturally, Feiyang took care of me a little more. Ren Wushuang scratched her head awkwardly. Qin Feiyang looked at Ren Wushuang strangely and chuckled. Sis, you weren't so honest before. What did you say? Ren Wushuang glared at him with her almond-shaped eyes. It was her first time meeting the legendary Empress Dowager. Of course, she had to perform well and leave a good impression. But she didn't expect this guy to be so tactless and expose her in public. He didn't give her any face at all. Qin Feiyang chuckled and decisively took a few steps back. He was quite clear about the character of this tigress. She would flip out whenever she wanted, regardless of whether there was anyone around. Feiyang, you're back. At this moment, another old voice could be heard from behind. Old master. Qin Feiyang's spirit was lifted, and he hurriedly turned to look at the door. The old man was standing outside the door. His clothes were tattered. He looked extremely haggard. However, at this moment, his aged face was glowing and full of smiles. Old master, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Qin Feiyang strode to the front of the old man and lowered his head with an apologetic expression. Silly boy, what's there to be sorry about? When I learned of your true identity, I guessed that this day would come sooner or later. The old man smiled, his face full of affection. Qin Feiyang asked cautiously, Then you don't blame me for lying to you? He remembered that when he and Mu Qing entered the Forgotten Continent, he didn't reveal his true identity to the old man. Of course I do. But now that things have come to this, what else can I say? The old man shook his head and sighed. Then, he looked at the woman in white and bowed. Greetings, Empress. Elder Run, you're welcome. The woman in white smiled. It could be seen that the old man took care of Qin Feiyang a lot in the spiritual state. As for the people that had taken care of Qin Feiyang, she was very grateful. You're really lucky. I thought you would die in the Forgotten Continent. At this moment, another familiar voice sounded. Qin Feiyang frowned and turned to look at the door. He saw a young man in white slowly walking into the cell. It was Lu Xingchen. You're not dead yet, how can I bear to die? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. As he spoke, he glanced at Yiglao. However, he found that Yiglao's eyes didn't change much when he saw Lu Xingchen. At the same time, Lu Xingchen also glanced at Yiglao, but his expression didn't change much. Then, he looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. My life is tough. I'm afraid no one can take it away. That's not necessarily true. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. But he was extremely confused. Yiglao did everything he could to save Lu Xingchen, but now that he saw Lu Xingchen in person, why didn't he do anything? What were these people trying to hide? Brother Qin, long time no see. How have you been? Suddenly, accompanied by a vigorous voice, Dong Zhongyang also walked into the cell. Behind Dong Zhongyang there was Shun Mei and the ugly old woman Zhu Yu. Now all the servants were present. Yes. Time passes so fast. Several years have passed in the blink of an eye. Qin Feiyang sighed and then nodded to Shun Mei with a smile. After a few years, this woman had become more mature and feminine. Welcome back. Shun Mei also smiled. Thank you. Qin Feiyang said. Shun Mei smiled, looked at the woman in white and asked, She's your mother, right? Qin Feiyang nodded. Greetings, Auntie. Shun Mei and Dong Zhongyang immediately walked over and bowed. Zhu Yu glanced at Qin Feiyang and was about to bow to the woman in white. But Qin Feiyang blocked in front of her. What's wrong? Zhu Yu looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang bowed deeply and said, First of all, I want to apologize to you. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have been locked up here. It's fine. Zhu Yu waved her hand and waited for him to continue. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, then sent a sound transmission. The Forgotten Continent is forbidden to enter. But why did you let me in? At first, he didn't know that the emperor had ordered that no one was allowed to enter the Forgotten Continent. So, when Zhu Yu asked him to go to the Forgotten Continent to snatch the heavenly thunder flames, he didn't suspect anything. But later on, when he found out about these things, he felt that Zhu Yu's purpose was not simple. Later on, when he found out about the secret hidden in the heavenly thunder flames, He was even more convinced that Zhu Yu had other motives. He even suspected that Zhu Yu might also know the secret hidden in the heavenly thunder flames. If that was the case, then Zhu Yu's identity was definitely not as simple as it seemed on the surface. And hearing Qin Feiyang's question, Zhu Yu also replied without hesitation, I just want you to go and gain experience. Gain experience? Qin Feiyang frowned. Gain experience was equivalent to nurturing. In other words, Zhu Yu's words meant that she was nurturing him. However, Zhu Yu privately asked him to go to the Forgotten Continent, which was disobeying the emperor's orders. This was a capital offense. Risking her head to let him go to the Forgotten Continent to gain experience, how could this be justified? It was reasonable to say that their relationship was especially good. For example, he was some kind of relative of Zhu Yu. But back then, he and Zhu Yu didn't know each other at all. So in Qin Feiyang's view, Zhu Yu's reason was too far-fetched and not convincing at all. Qin Feiyang sighed. Senior, I can basically conclude that you have no ill intentions towards me, and are really doing it for my own good. But it is precisely because of this that you should tell me everything. Zhu Yu was silent. Senior, to tell you the truth, I already know the hidden secret of the heavenly thunder flame. I was also thinking, do you also know? Qin Feiyang said again. Already know? Zhu Yu looked at him in surprise. Yes. Moreover, not only the heavenly thunder flame, the mysterious sky flame and the ice flame are also in my hands now, Qin Feiyang said. This, Zhu Yu was extremely shocked. After a moment, she smiled bitterly and said to herself, I didn't expect you to see through it so quickly. You are indeed extremely smart. But I'm sorry, I really can't say it now because I don't want to affect you. But there is one thing I can tell you. I do know the hidden secret of the heavenly thunder flame. The reason why I asked you to snatch the heavenly thunder flame is precisely to let you enter that miracle. Zhu Yu said. Hearing these words, Qin Feiyang's heart trembled. Zhu Yu was indeed nurturing him. But why was this? They had no relatives or friends, they were complete strangers. What benefits did this have for her? However, Zhu Yu ignored him and walked towards the woman in white without looking back. Lu Xingchen looked at Zhu Yu, then looked at Qin Feiyang and asked secretly, What did you and her say in secret? It has something to do with you? Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at him from the corner of his eyes. All right, pretend I didn't ask. Lu Xingchen shrugged his shoulders with an innocent look on his face. Qin Feiyang looked at Lu Xingchen. His heart suddenly moved, and sent a sound transmission. Were you the one who went to the treasure pavilion to purchase medicinal herbs in the past few years? Lu Xingchen was startled and asked in confusion. In the past few years, I have indeed gone to the treasure pavilion to purchase a lot of medicinal herbs. But why do I not understand what you mean? Qin Feiyang said. The medicinal herbs I am talking about are the potential pill. The potential pill? This. Chapter 9-10. Qin Feiyang sized up Lu Xingchen. Lu Xingchen's emotions were very sincere, and there was no trace of falsehood in them. But he didn't dare to believe Lu Xingchen, because Lu Xingchen was a person who was better at disguising than him. So he couldn't judge whether Lu Xingchen was telling the truth or not. Cough cough. Suddenly, Yiglao, who had been silent the whole time, put his fist to his mouth and coughed. Everyone was slightly stunned and looked at him. And Dong Zhengyang and the others only noticed this old man now. It was also only now that they realized that the lightning tribulation here was blocked by a barrier. And the owner of the barrier was this old man. Their hearts were suddenly set off by stormy waves. To be able to easily block these lightning tribulations, how strong was this old man's cultivation? At the same time, Yiglao glanced at everyone and said, Although this old man doesn't want to ruin the atmosphere of your reunion after a long separation, this old man has to say something. It's not good to stay here for long, it's best to leave immediately. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang suddenly quivered and wanted to slap himself a few times. Where was this? This was the god's prison. He actually had the mood to chat here, wasn't he courting death? If the imperial preceptor suddenly barged in, wouldn't they all be wiped out? Qin Feiyang looked at Yiglao and said, Quickly open the space-time gate and return to the Forgotten Continent. Yiglao nodded, and the space-time gate immediately rushed out of his body. I can't leave. But at this moment, the woman in white said, What? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Feiyang, I can't leave either. The old man followed. This, Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them, not knowing what to do for a moment. You know this old man's character. As the former lord of the spiritual state, this old man will never betray the great Qin Empire. The old man said. Qin Feiyang said angrily. It was the emperor who was heartless first. How can this be called betrayal? No matter what, we are all subjects. If you want me to die, I have no choice but to die. What's more, His Majesty only imprisoned us. He didn't say he would kill us. Feiyang, we won't ask what you do. Even if one day, you and His Majesty become enemies, we won't persuade you. But we also hope that you can respect our choice. Old Master said. Qin Feiyang was furious to the extreme. He roared. Do you know that this is blind loyalty? The old man smiled and said, even if it's blind loyalty, this old man will not regret it. Qin Feiyang looked at his mother and asked, Mother, what's your reason? If I could leave, I would have left with you last time. The white-clothed woman sighed. Why? Can you tell me? Don't say things like you're still young and I don't want you to worry. I don't want you to bear too heavy a burden. Now that I've grown up, I can bear it with you. Qin Feiyang roared. Why did he come back this time? Wasn't it to take everyone out of the great Qin Empire? But the two most important people in his life had chosen to stay in the divine penitentiary. How could he not be anxious? Seeing Qin Feiyang's anxious look, the white-clothed woman couldn't help but feel distressed. But sometimes you can't do whatever you want. Tell me. Otherwise I'll go find him now. At worst I'll die. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. He was about to lose his mind. This he naturally referred to the emperor. When the white-clothed woman heard Qin Feiyang's angry words, she was a little angry. She said, Then tell me, can you defeat the state preceptor and your father? Qin Feiyang fell silent. The white-clothed woman sighed and said, When you have the strength to defeat them, I will tell you why you can't leave. Lu Xingqian's eyes flashed. He cupped his hands and said, Your Majesty, I have a question that has been puzzling me. I hope you can answer it for me. Go ahead. The white-clothed woman looked at Lu Xingqian. Qin Feiyang's grandfather is your father. Even the emperor is afraid of his strength. Why don't you ask him for help? Lu Xingqian asked. Yes, we can go to Grandpa. Mother, give me the coordinates of Grandpa's house. I'll go find him right away. Qin Feiyang quivered and said hurriedly. However, hearing this, the white-clothed woman's face turned cold. She said angrily, Tian'er, you're really disappointing me. Disappointed? Qin Feiyang looked at his mother suspiciously. What did he do to disappoint his mother? The white-clothed woman said, Remember, don't always think of asking others for help. You have to rely on yourself. Does Grandpa count as someone else? Qin Feiyang asked. He really couldn't figure out why his mother was hesitating. Your grandfather is old. We can't let him worry about us anymore, so I won't let you go to him. The white-clothed woman said in a tone that brooked no disobedience. So strange. Lu Xingqian muttered. Logically speaking, with such a big thing happening, even if the white-clothed woman didn't ask for help, Qin Feiyang's grandfather should have received the news. But why didn't he show up? Could it be, suddenly? Lu Xingqian seemed to think of something. His eyes trembled slightly. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, I can't leave with you either. I don't plan to take you away. You can do whatever you want. Qin Feiyang said impatiently. You? Lu Xingqian immediately glared at him and said, We used to fight side by side. Aren't you afraid of making me sad by saying this? Qin Feiyang ignored him. Lu Xingqian was very embarrassed. He thought that Qin Feiyang would more or less ask why he didn't leave, but he didn't expect that he didn't ask anything. To be exact, he didn't exist at all. Why do I have to do this? He sighed secretly. But Qin Feiyang didn't care about Lu Xingqian, but it didn't mean that others didn't care. For example, Mu Qing, at this moment in the castle, was already anxious to jump over the wall. At the same time, Yiglao also looked at Lu Xingqian. Although he didn't say anything, his confused eyes proved everything. Lu Xingqian certainly noticed Yiglao's eyes, but he just smiled faintly. However, it was unknown whether the two of them were communicating in secret. Alas! Looking at the silent Qin Feiyang, The white-clothed woman sighed softly and said with a smile, Tioner, Mother is already very satisfied that you can come back to see Mother. Don't delay any longer. Go quickly. Qin Feiyong closed his eyes in pain. Where's the commander of the Kirin army? Suddenly, Dong Zhongyang's surprised voice sounded. As soon as he said this, everyone scanned the prison cell, but they couldn't find the commander of the Kirin army. Yigleo's expression changed, and he hurriedly said, Go outside and take a look. Lu Xingchen turned around and took a step out, landing in the corridor outside, and said in a deep voice, He's gone. Damn it. Yigleo's eyes darkened, and he hurriedly looked at Qin Feiyong and shouted, He must have slipped away when we weren't paying attention. Quickly erase his soul. He should have already informed the emperor and the state preceptor. You must leave quickly, or it will be too late. Lu Xingchen returned to the prison cell and urged. Yigleo waved his arm, and a palm-sized space-time gate floated in the air. Following closely, his index finger pointed in the air, and streams of divine power rushed out crazily. The space-time gate also suddenly bloomed with dazzling brilliance. Whoosh! It was also at this moment Qin Feiyong finally opened his eyes, and two shocking murderous intents burst out. Ever since he took control of the commander of the Kirin army, it was only at that time that he peeked into the inner thoughts of the commander of the Kirin army. After that he didn't peek. Because in his opinion, the commander of the Kirin army knew the horror of the slave seal, and shouldn't be rash. But he didn't expect that he would betray him at this time. However, just as he was about to erase the soul of the commander of the Kirin army, a series of steady footsteps suddenly sounded in the corridor outside. Could it be that he's here? Everyone turned pale with fright. What will come will eventually come. Qin Feiyong took a deep breath and looked up at the door. Everyone also gathered together and stared at the door. The footsteps were getting closer and closer, but they couldn't sense any aura, as if a ghost was walking in the corridor. After a few breaths, finally, an old man in white who seemed to have an immortal aura appeared outside the door. State Preceptor. Immediately, everyone's pupils contracted. At the same time, State Preceptor stopped and stood outside the door. He glanced at Qin Feiyong and the others, and a bright smile appeared on his old face. You finally came back. Finally. His eyes fell on Qin Feiyong and he laughed. Isn't this just as you wish? Qin Feiyong said. Seeing State Preceptor in person, the tension in his heart disappeared. So, are you going to take the initiative to hand over Changshui and the castle, or do you want me to do it myself? State Preceptor looked at him with a smile. I want to ask, do you want Changshui and the castle, or do you want His Majesty? The woman in white walked out and stood beside Qin Feiyong, looking at State Preceptor and asked, Greetings, Your Majesty. State Preceptor bowed symbolically and said with a smile, It's me and His Majesty. The woman in white raised her eyebrows and said, I'm afraid it's you. I want to see His Majesty. State Preceptor shook his head and said, His Majesty is accompanying the little prince, and probably has no time to see you. The little prince? The woman in white frowned. Mother, don't you know? He and that woman gave birth to another Ryuko, and they named him Qin Haotian. They even built a Haotian palace for this Ryuko. Qin Feiyong said word by word. His eyes were filled with anger that couldn't be dispersed. What? The woman in white trembled, and her slightly aged cheeks turned pale in an instant. I told everyone to hide this from you, Your Majesty. I was afraid that you would be angry after hearing it. Please forgive me, Your Majesty. State Preceptor bowed and said with a smile. Qin Feiyong looked at his mother worriedly, then looked at State Preceptor and shouted, Put away your hypocritical face. It seems that you have a big prejudice against me. Actually, there's really no need to do this. As long as you hand over Changshui and the castle, I'll immediately go to His Majesty and plead for you. At that time, not only will your mother be free, but your friends will also not have to suffer in the divine penitentiary. State Preceptor said with a smile. Plead for me? Lord State Preceptor, isn't that a little funny? I heard that His Majesty didn't intend to imprison you in the divine penitentiary. It was you who begged His Majesty repeatedly, and he finally did so. Moreover, it was your idea to imprison us in the divine penitentiary. Now you're using this matter to play the good guy. Isn't that too unethical? As a person, especially when you're the state preceptor of the great Qin Empire, you're above everyone else. It's best to have some face. Chapter 9:11. The imperial preceptor narrowed his eyes and looked at Lu Xingqian. You are very bold. I was just speaking the truth. If I have offended the imperial preceptor, I hope you can forgive me. Lu Xingqian bowed and said. His attitude was neither servile nor overbearing, and there was no fear at all. The imperial preceptor looked at him coldly, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, Your Highness, please make a decision quickly. Impossible. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Clang. Rumble. The spacetime gate continued to expand, and the aura it emitted became stronger and stronger. The imperial preceptor was not surprised when he heard Qin Feiyang's reply. He raised his head and looked at the spacetime gate in Yiglao. His old eyes flashed and he said with a smile, Not bad, you actually invited a false god to help, but, at this point, the imperial preceptor's eyes turned cold and he said, Even if a false god helps you, don't think about escaping again without my permission. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and waved it. A terrifying divine power surged out and pounced towards Qin Feiyang and the others in the cell. Qin Feiyang and the others did not hide and hurriedly hid behind Yiglao. Aren't you looking down on this old man too much? Yiglao snorted from his nose, and a majestic divine power emerged from his body and fiercely rushed out. Boom! The two divine powers collided, and a destructive aura suddenly shrouded the entire cell. The entire divine prison trembled violently at this moment. Qin Feiyang and the others hiding behind Yiglao, although they were protected by Yiglao, were still seriously injured. They spat out blood and their faces were pale. Everyone was shocked. At the moment when the two divine powers collided, they had a very real feeling, as if the god of death had arrived. Was the strength of a false god so terrifying? If not for Yiglao's protection, they would have all died in that instant. After one round of confrontation, the state preceptor's gaze turned completely cold. He looked at Yiglao and said, You shouldn't have interfered with Qin Feiyang's affairs. Boom! The imperial tutor's aura completely erupted, like a huge wave madly pouncing towards Yiglao. Are you trying to scare me? Yiglao smiled coldly, and the pressure of a fake god surged out like a tsunami. For a moment he was on par with the imperial advisor. But, deep in Yiglao's eyes there was a trace of worry. He transmitted his voice, You have to think of a way to stall him. What is it? Qin Feiyang and the others were shocked. My strength is on par with the imperial preceptor. Normally I wouldn't be afraid of him at all. But now I have to focus on reviving the spacetime gate. The spacetime gate is a divine artifact. To revive it would require almost all of my divine power. That's why I can't fight him now. Yiglao transmitted his voice. Everyone's eyes darkened. This was really bad news. Dong Zhengyang secretly said, Qin Feiyang, Lu Xingqian, why don't we go to your divine artifact? No. In our divine artifact, the spacetime gate is the same as the teleportation gate. They can't be teleported. Because our divine artifact is also a divine artifact. It can cut off the spacetime gate from the outside world. Lu Xingqian said. Lu Xingqian is right. We have to think of another way. Yiglao also nodded without leaving a trace. Hearing this, everyone's heart fell to the bottom. Shen Mei suddenly said, Why don't we go to the castle to hide first? Yes. Although we can't escape, we can at least share some of the pressure with Yiglao. Let's wait for him to revive the spacetime gate before we come out? Dong Zhengyang suggested. I think you're scared, silly. If we enter the castle, won't he stop Yiglao from reviving the spacetime gate? Is he that stupid? Lu Xingqian rolled his eyes at him. Dong Zhengyang was also a little annoyed. He frowned and said, Then what do you think we should do? Lu Xingqian shook his head and said, I don't have a choice. We can only rely on Qin Feiyang now. Hearing this, everyone looked at Qin Feiyang in unison. Looking at everyone, Qin Feiyang fell into a struggle and self-blame. If he could keep an eye on the commander of the Kirin army and not give him a chance to betray them, they wouldn't be in this situation at all. What should they do now? Hand over Changshui and the castle? But he couldn't do it. Besides, even if he did, the state preceptor might not keep his promise and let everyone go. At this moment, everyone was at a loss. But there was one person who was very calm. She was Qin Feiyang's mother. She glanced at everyone and then looked at Qin Feiyang. A gentle light flashed in her eyes. Then, she took a step forward and stood in front of Yiglao. The two divine powers that were fighting tore her body apart in an instant. Blood gushed out. This sudden change was not only unexpected by Qin Feiyang and the others, but also by the state preceptor and Yiglao. One had to know. Now the divine powers of the fake gods were clashing. Running out like this was simply courting death. Mother. When Qin Feiyang saw this scene, he suddenly turned pale with horror and rushed to the woman in white without hesitation. Yiglao and the state preceptor also came to their senses and withdrew their divine powers at the same time. Bang! The woman in white turned to look at Qin Feiyang. Her body was stained with blood, which was tragic and beautiful. And her eyes were unprecedentedly bright and clear. There was a trace of relief, as well as an apology and encouragement to Qin Feiyang. It was as if she was saying to Qin Feiyang, "I'm sorry, I can't accompany you in the future. You must live well." Then, she slowly fell to the ground. When she fell to the ground, there was no blame or injustice on her blood-stained face. There was only a bright smile. That smile was brighter than the sun, enough to make the world pale. Mother. Qin Feiyang quickly rushed forward and hugged his mother in his arms. Looking at his mother's broken body and her beautiful face, his heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. He was in so much pain that he wanted to die. Yiglao said, "She's not dead yet. Maybe she can still be saved. Quickly give her the heart protection pill, spirit sea pill, and essence soul pill." That's right. Although it was only a moment before, although the woman in white's cultivation was also very strong, Yiglao and Yiglao were both fake gods. Under the fake god realm, all living beings were like ants. The divine power of the two not only tore her body, but also shattered her sea of qi, sea of consciousness and internal organs. Could even be said that there was not a single place that was intact. It was also because the injuries were too serious that Yiglao said that, maybe she can be saved. What he meant was that the chances were not high. In the blink of an eye. Hearing Qin Feiyang's words, Qin Feiyang immediately entered the castle and looked at Fatso anxiously. "Quickly give me the pill. Use it. It can definitely pull Auntie back from the gates of hell." Fatso pointed to the space above the altar where the six-word divine art was placed. There, a cluster of green flames floated. It was the size of a palm and exuded a majestic vitality. Qin Feiyang looked up and his eyes immediately lit up with ecstasy. He nodded and said, "Yes, use it." This cluster of flames was the third cluster of fire of life he had obtained. Back then, when he and Fatso were seriously injured, they had fused with the first two clusters of fire of life to escape the calamity. And this time it would definitely work too. He grabbed the fire of life and appeared beside his mother. Boundless life energy instantly filled every corner of the prison cell. "This is fire of life." The Grand Tutor and Yiglao's eyes widened, greed crawling up their old faces. The Grand Tutor immediately released a trace of pressure and pounced toward Qin Feiyang, wanting to snatch the fire of life. Qin Feiyang glanced at the Grand Tutor coldly and said to Yiglao, "If you don't help me, our cooperation ends here." Yiglao raised his eyebrows. He waved his hand and a pressure emerged, condensing an invisible barrier in front of Qin Feiyang, blocking the Grand Tutor's pressure. "You really like to meddle in other people's business." The Grand Tutor was completely furious. He placed both hands in front of his chest and formed seals with lightning speed. An aura that could destroy heaven and earth roared out from his hands. This was a battle art. Yiglao's eyes darkened and said, "It seems that this battle is unavoidable. You guys go to the castle immediately." As he spoke, he decisively put away the gate of time and space. As long as the Grand Tutor did not stop, he would not be able to revive the gate of time and space. It would be better to fight first and see whose wrist was harder. Qin Feiyang also finally placed the fire of life into his mother's mouth. Immediately, that terrifying life force surged towards the white-clothed woman's limbs and bones like a tide. The wounds all over her body immediately began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Seeing that his mother's condition was gradually stabilizing, Qin Feiyang finally heaved a sigh of relief. Shua! Suddenly, he stood up and stared at the Grand Tutor, saying, "Although my mother is no longer the empress, she is still the emperor's wife. How dare you hurt her?" "Hurt her? Let me tell you, if you don't hand over Changshui and the castle today, don't mention hurting her, I will kill her." The Grand Tutor laughed sinisterly, looking quite ferocious. "How dare you?" But at this moment, a loud and clear voice resounded in the prison of gods. It was filled with a majestic aura. "Your Majesty!" The Grand Tutor's body trembled, and he quickly turned around to see a middle-aged man standing in the corridor in front of him. This man wore a dragon crown on his head and a dragon robe on his body. His whole body was surrounded by golden light, exuding a vast aura. His face was cold, and his eyes were full of spirit. That 7-feet-tall body was like an unreachable giant mountain. An invisible pressure covered the sky and covered the earth. Even the Grand Tutor, who was a false god, could not help but lower his head, looking extremely respectful. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The Grand Tutor bowed. The Emperor took a step forward, and every step seemed steady and powerful. Beside the Emperor, there was a middle-aged man in purple armor, who was the commander of the Kirin army. Obviously, the Emperor was called by the commander of the Kirin army. The Grand Tutor glanced at the Emperor, and then looked at the commander of the Kirin army, with a faint cold light in his eyes. At the same time, the old lord and the others in the cell listened to the approaching footsteps and held their breaths. But Qin Feiyang's eyes were full of disgust. A few seconds later, the Emperor finally reached the door of the cell and turned around to look at Qin Feiyang and the others. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The old lord and the others knelt down and kowtowed. Lu Xingchen frowned, but in the end, he also knelt on the ground. Only Qin Feiyang and Yiglao did not do anything. Yiglao was a false god, and he was not a subject of the great Qin Empire, so he did not need to kowtow. As for Qin Feiyang, he only hated the emperor, so of course he would not kowtow. Chapter 9:12. Suddenly, the emperor looked at the woman in white lying on the ground. His expression changed slightly and he hurried over. "Get lost." Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and directly stood in front of his mother. The emperor stopped in front of Qin Feiyang and said, "You are your mother, but you are also my imperial concubine. I have the right to care about her. Don't cry crocodile tears here. If you really care about my mother, why didn't you come to see her all these years? Do you know how my mother survived all these years in the gods' prison? Care? What a ridiculous word. Your ruthlessness and indifference have completely made me give up. Get lost. Instead of coming here to put on an act, you might as well go back and accompany your youngest son." Qin Feiyang looked at him coldly, determined not to give in. The emperor frowned and said, "You know all about it? It's not a secret. However, I have something to tell you. Although the name Zhang Haotian has been abandoned by me, it is not something that can be replaced by anyone." Qin Feiyang said word by word, and his eyes flashed with a shocking cold light. The emperor's pupils shrank and said, "I'm warning you, don't hurt him." "Haha. You're defending him now. Seems that you really care about him. If killing him can make you suffer, it's worth a try." Qin Feiyang joked. Whoosh! The emperor's arm shot out and grabbed Qin Feiyang's neck. He said in a deep voice, "If you dare to touch a single hair of his, I will kill you with my own hands. Then do it now. You've always wanted to kill me anyway, haven't you?" Qin Feiyang looked at him indifferently. There was no fear in his eyes, only coldness. A bone-piercing coldness. The emperor looked at him deeply, and finally let go of his big hand. He pushed Qin Feiyang away and bent down to pick up the woman in white. "Put her down." Qin Feiyang was extremely angry. Like a mad beast, he madly pounced towards the emperor. Boom! A powerful aura rushed out from the emperor's body, and Qin Feiyang was sent flying. He crashed into a wall and coughed up blood. "Don't challenge my bottom line again," the emperor said without turning his head. Then he carried the woman out of the cell. "Your Majesty, allow me." The commander of the Kirin army stepped forward and looked at the unconscious woman in white. "No need." Then he looked at the imperial advisor and said, Did you just say that you want to kill her? The Imperial Preceptor's gaze trembled as he hurriedly said, Your Majesty, this is a misunderstanding. Let me explain. I don't want to pursue what you've done behind my back all these years. We only have one order. Release them immediately. Diwang said. Your Majesty, you can't. When the State Preceptor heard this, he immediately became anxious. What is it? Now you even dare to disobey my orders. The Emperor's gaze turned cold as he shouted. I don't dare. The Imperial Advisor hurriedly lowered his head and said, Your Majesty, we can release the others, but Qin Feiyang murdered the prince. He has committed a heinous crime. Lock him up in the penitentiary and wait for my orders. As for the person from the Forgotten Continent, expel him immediately. Commander, you stay and accompany the Imperial Advisor, the Emperor said expressionlessly. After that, he ignored the Imperial Advisor and strode away with the woman in white in his arms. Yes, Your Majesty. The commander of the Kirin army bowed to the Emperor's back as he left. Farewell, Your Majesty. The Imperial Advisor also hurriedly bowed to see the Emperor off, but his old face was ashen. Give my mother back to me, however, at this moment. Qin Feiyang rushed out of the cell and roared hysterically. His eyes were bloodshot. The commander of the Kirin army grabbed him and said, Calm down. His Majesty won't hurt the Queen. It's all because of you that we're in this situation. I'm going to kill you. Qin Feiyang suddenly turned around and stared at the commander of the Kirin army with a cruel smile on his face. Stop. Lu Xingchen saw that the situation was bad and hurriedly tried to persuade him. Although the commander of the Kirin army betrayed you, he also saved your mother. If he hadn't called the Emperor over, your mother might have been killed by the Imperial Advisor. From this, it can be seen that he still has some feelings for you. Moreover, if you kill him now, the Imperial Advisor will have a reason to kill you first and report to the Emperor later. After all, killing the commander of the Kirin army isn't a small matter. Hearing Lu Xingchen's words, Qin Feiyang finally calmed down. The commander of the Kirin army also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he looked at Yiglao and cupped his hands. Your Excellency, please leave the Great Qin Empire immediately. Yiglao was a false god. If he wanted to leave, no one in the Great Qin Empire could stop him. Therefore it was better to just let him go. Yiglao frowned and looked at Qin Feiyang, then at Lu Xingchen, and finally at the Imperial Advisor. If the Imperial Advisor wasn't here, he could take everyone and leave. But now he had to abandon Qin Feiyang and the others. Clang! He took out the space-time gate again and poured his divine power into it. The commander of the Kirin army looked at the space-time gate with a serious expression. Although he didn't know what the space-time gate was used for, it wasn't difficult to judge from the divine power it emitted that it was a teleportation divine artifact. And it was a divine artifact that could be used to escape. Otherwise, this old man wouldn't have tried to revive so many times. He looked at the old man and the others and said, All of you, come out and stand behind the Imperial Advisor. He did this to prevent Yiglao from escaping with everyone after opening the space-time gate. The old man and the others looked at each other and walked out of the cell one after another. They stood behind Qin Feiyang and the others. A dozen breaths passed. Accompanied by a deafening sound, the space-time gate finally opened. Yiglao wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at Qin Feiyang. He said, Call Mu Qing out. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and Mu Qing suddenly appeared out of thin air. As soon as Mu Qing came out, she looked at Lu Xingchen and frowned. There was also a questioning look in her eyes. However, Lu Xingchen didn't say anything, but it was unknown if he secretly transmitted his voice. Yiglao said, Qing, let's go. Okay. Mu Qing nodded and walked toward Yiglao. At the same time, she transmitted her voice to Qin Feiyang without looking back. Don't worry, we'll come back to save you soon. Save me? Qin Feiyang was stunned and secretly said, Are you sure you can deal with the Imperial Advisor and the Emperor? Mu Qing didn't respond. But when he walked to the space-time gate, he suddenly transmitted his voice, I'm not sure, but I can think of a way. After that, Mu Qing and Yiglao both stepped into the space-time gate and disappeared from everyone's sight in the blink of an eye. Then even the space-time gate disappeared. Save me. Qin Feiyang was confused. Logically speaking, now that he had fallen into the hands of the emperor, Mu Qing should have given up on him. But why did she still want to save him? Just because of the heavenly dipper flame? But didn't the Mu family also arrange for others to sneak into the Pill Pagoda? Even without him, it wouldn't be difficult to snatch the heavenly dipper flame. Taking a step back, even if those people arranged by the Mu family failed to snatch the heavenly dipper flame, wasn't there still Mu Qing's second grandpa? This person had been hiding in the Pill Pagoda for so many years and was still a divine envoy. If he made a move, there would be no suspense at all. So, now, the Mu family didn't need to come to the imperial capital to save him at all. Could it be that in the eyes of the Mu family, he still had other value? Hurry up and go in. Just as Qin Feiyong was pondering, the imperial advisor suddenly made a move and pushed Qin Feiyong's back with force. Qin Feiyong immediately followed the inertia and ran uncontrollably toward the cell. This move made the old master and the others' faces change color. The thunder tribulation in the cell was still there. And Yiglao had already left. Without the protection of the divine enchantment, Qin Feiyong would instantly die under the thunder tribulation if he entered the cell. At this critical moment, Ren Wuxuang quickly rushed forward and pulled Qin Feiyong back again. Qin Feiyong also came back to his senses. His whole body was immediately dripping with cold sweat. Whoosh! He suddenly turned around and looked at the imperial advisor. The murderous intent in his eyes was undisguised. This old bastard, he actually wanted to harm him. If it wasn't for Ren Wuxuang's timely move, he was afraid that he would have been smashed into pieces by the thunder tribulation. Not even his bones would be left. Imperial advisor, did you do it on purpose? The commander of the Kirin army also frowned and looked at the imperial advisor. How dare you? Do you know who you are talking to? The imperial advisor suddenly shouted with a stern voice. That gloomy look in his eyes was as if he was looking at a dead person. Extremely frightening. Previously, he was already very angry when the commander of the Kirin army called the emperor over and ruined his plans. Now, the commander of the Kirin army was questioning him in public, which made him very angry. I'm sorry. The commander of the Kirin army quickly lowered his head, his face full of fear. You're on your own. The imperial advisor snorted coldly, his words full of threat. Then, he glanced at Qin Feiyong and turned to leave the prison of God. Phew! When the imperial advisor completely disappeared from sight, the commander of the Kirin army heaved a long sigh of relief. Lu Xingqian withdrew his gaze and whispered, Brother Qin, you have to be careful. This old bastard will definitely do something to you again. I know. Qin Feiyong nodded. Ren Wuxuang looked at Qin Feiyong worriedly and said, Feiyong, you shouldn't have come back this time. Yes. Now we can go out, but you are locked in again. The old man sighed. Qin Feiyong looked at the two of them and said with a smile, Don't worry, I'll be fine. It's not like we don't know the situation in the prison of God. How can we not worry? The old man rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyong, and then looked at the commander of the Kirin army. He bowed and said, Sir, can you remove the thunder tribulation in the cell? No. But it can reduce the power of the thunder tribulation. The commander of the Kirin army shook his head. The old man frowned. Lu Xingqian smiled and said, Grandparent, don't worry. This guy has the castle. The thunder tribulation can't hurt him at all. Yes. The old man was suddenly enlightened. Qin Feiyong could enter the castle to avoid the bombardment of the thunder tribulation. However, the commander of the Kirin army frowned, but he didn't say anything. He looked at the old man and the others and said with a smile, Wait for me at the door. I have a few words to say to His Highness in private. Everyone nodded, but they didn't leave immediately. They all looked at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong waved his hand and said with a smile, It's just the prison of God. It's no big deal. Don't worry. Lu Xingqian was stunned for a moment before he smiled bitterly and said, Only a guy like you can say something like that here. After that, he shook his head and turned to leave. Shuang, let's go too. The old man patted Ren Wuxuang's shoulder. Ren Wuxuang looked at Qin Feiyong and said, You must survive. Qin Feiyong nodded heavily. Then, the old man pulled Ren Wuxuang and turned to leave. Take care. Dong Zhongyang and the others also cupped their hands to Qin Feiyong. There was a trace of gratitude in their eyes. If Qin Feiyong hadn't appeared, They didn't know how long they would have been locked up. They might not even be able to leave the prison of God for the rest of their lives. Take care. Qin Feiyong also smiled at them. They left one after another. Chapter 9:13. Qin Feiyong said, "What do you want to say? Just say it." No matter what, it was the commander of the Kirin army's fault that he ended up in this situation. He was not a saint, so he could not let it go. The commander of the Kirin army asked cautiously, "Can this slave seal? You want me to lift the slave seal? Do you think it's possible?" Qin Feiyong pursed his lips into a cold smile. "Why not? Before this, there was no personal grudge between us." The commander of the Kirin army said unwillingly. Qin Feiyong said, "Anyone who is loyal to the emperor is my enemy." The commander of the Kirin army said angrily, "Don't you know that's too extreme? The emperor did let you down, but he didn't really kill you. What do you know? Back then, when I was expelled from the imperial palace, if it weren't for my mother who begged for mercy for me, I would have been killed by him." Qin Feiyong shouted. The commander of the Kirin army heard this and could not help but feel helpless. Of course, he also knew about this. But there was a saying that it was better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. Moreover, the two of them were father and son, and blood was thicker than water. Was it necessary to fight like this? The commander of the Kirin army did not say anything more and asked, "Can the slave seal really control my soul? Do you think I'm bluffing? Okay, I'll let you have a taste of your soul being crushed." Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed with a cold light, and his mind moved slightly. "Ah!" The commander of the Kirin army suddenly held his head and screamed. At this very moment he truly felt as if his soul was about to shatter. The intense pain caused his face to twist and distort. "Stop, stop, stop." He hurriedly waved his hand. If Qin Feiyong did not stop, his soul would definitely be crushed. No, it was crushed. Qin Feiyong looked at him coldly and stopped operating the slave seal. The commander of the Qilin army immediately sensed that the intense pain had disappeared. Don't even think about asking the imperial preceptor or the emperor to help you remove the slave seal, because they don't have the ability to do so. In this world, only I can remove it. Qin Feiyong said lightly. The commander of the Kirin army turned pale. Looks like I won't be able to escape from this kid's evil clutches in this lifetime. He sighed deeply and said, "I heard from Wan Qiu that you were the one who kidnapped the Phantom Serpent Emperor?" "Yes." Qin Feiyong nodded. "I should have known that the only person in the Great Qin Empire who has the guts to barge into my governor's manor is you," the commander of the Kirin army said bitterly. Qin Feiyong glanced at him and asked, "Did you kill Wan Qiu?" "No. I wanted to kill him, but my daughter, speaking of which." The commander of the Kirin army furrowed his brows and felt an indescribable sense of irritation. Sometimes don't worry too much and cut the Gordian knot, Qin Feiyong said with killing intent surging in his eyes. The commander of the Kirin army narrowed his eyes and frowned. What kind of person is Wan Qiu? A villain? Qin Feiyong snorted disdainfully and asked, "Do you have any other questions?" The commander of the Kirin army shook his head. He just wanted to remove the slave seal, but Qin Feiyong obviously wouldn't let him do so. Qin Feiyong waved his hand and said, "If you don't have any more questions, then leave." The commander of the Kirin army looked at him and wanted to say something. But in the end, he didn't say anything and walked towards the door in disappointment. Qin Feiyong frowned and pondered for a while. He looked at the back of the commander of the Kirin army and said, "Don't say I didn't give you a chance. Help me keep an eye on my mother. And take care of the old man and the others. As long as you can do it, I may remove your slave seal in the future." After that, Qin Feiyong looked away and turned to look at the cell filled with thunder tribulations. Hearing this, the commander of the Kirin army trembled and there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. After the commander of the Kirin army left, a black figure walked into the penitentiary. It was the black-robed old man who was guarding the door and suddenly asked for Qin Feiyong's name when he entered the penitentiary. The commander of the Kirin army called him ancestor, so he must have a high status in the imperial palace. But Qin Feiyong had never seen this man before. "I didn't expect that I, who had been wise all my life, would let a little bastard like you sneak into the penitentiary." The black-robed old man walked towards Qin Feiyong and said coldly, Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and looked at the black-robed old man. He said, "Did you eat feces? Why is your mouth so smelly?" The black-robed old man's body stiffened and his old eyes were filled with anger. He said in a deep voice, "Little bastard, I dare you to say that again." Qin Feiyong sneered. "I think not only did you eat feces but you also didn't have a mother to teach you. You're courting death." The black-robed old man stepped out and instantly landed in front of Qin Feiyong. He raised his old hand and directly hit Qin Feiyong's face. Qin Feiyong smiled disdainfully and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. The black-robed old man suddenly blew his beard and glared. He shouted, "Little bastard, come out and fight me one-on-one if you have the guts. Don't hide in the castle like a coward." Is this old man stupid? Inside the castle, Fatso and the others looked at each other. A 9-star combat emperor asked a 9-star combat master to fight him one-on-one. Was his head kicked by a donkey? Wolf King asked Little Qinzi, "Are you really going to stay in this damned place forever?" "What else?" Qin Feiyong asked. Wolf King raised his eyebrows and said worriedly, "If we don't think of a way to leave this place, we will definitely die." Not to mention the emperor, even the imperial advisor would not let them go. Moreover, from the black-robed old man's attitude towards Qin Feiyong, it could be expected that he should also be one of the imperial advisor's men. In short, staying here would not end well. Qin Feiyong glanced at everyone and said with a smile, "Don't worry, someone won't let us die." "Who?" Wolf King was surprised. Before Mu Qing left, what he said to Qin Feiyong was through a secret sound transmission, so not only did the imperial advisor and the others not know, even Wolf King and the others did not know. Mu family. Qin Feiyong's eyes flickered. This, Wolf King, Fatso and the others looked at each other, their eyes full of suspicion. They really couldn't think of a reason why the Mu family would come to save them. Lu Hong said, "Is it because of the heavenly thunder flame, the ice flame and the mysterious sky flame?" Huh. Qin Feiyong was stunned. When he was thinking about this problem before, he ignored these 3 flames. Now that Lu Hong reminded him, he remembered that to summon and open that miracle, he needed to gather 10 clusters of flames. And now there are 3 clusters of flames in his hands. If the Mu family doesn't save him, then even if the Mu family gets the heavenly thunder flame, they can't enter the miracle. Haha, at this point Qin Feiyong laughed. Sure enough, there is always a way out. He also looked forward to it. How is the Mu family going to save him? You know, it's not a simple matter to snatch people from the hands of the imperial advisor and the emperor. Forgotten continent. Black Cloud Mountain. Above the top of the mountain stood 2 figures, one old and one young. It's Mu Qing and Yiglao. Both of them lowered their heads and remained silent. They seemed to be rather anxious. A moment later, Mu Qing clenched his hands, looked up at Yiglao, and said in a deep voice, "No matter what, we must save Qin Feiyong." "It's not easy." Yiglao shook his head. "As long as the imperial advisor is still in the imperial capital, it's almost impossible to save him. I thought of a person. If she's willing to help, plus you, the great ancestor, and the second ancestor, saving Qin Feiyong shouldn't be a problem," Mu Qing said. "Who?" Yiglao was stunned, looked at Mu Qing and asked. "That mysterious lady," Mu Qing said, his eyes bursting with radiance. Yiglao's heart moved and nodded. Maybe it's really possible after all. Her strength is still a mystery. But this person's whereabouts are mysterious. How can we find her? Spread out and dissipate. Just say that Qin Feiyong is in trouble. If she really has something to do with Qin Feiyong, she will naturally come to us. Mu Qing said. Yiglao frowned. But what if she and Qin Feiyong are just using their relationship and doesn't care about Qin Feiyong's life at all? Then we'll think of another way. You don't have to worry about this. Leave it to me, Mu Qing said. Well, I'll go back and recover my divine power. Let me know if there's any news. By the way, when you spread out and dissipate, don't reveal that we've been to the Great Qin Empire. Yiglao reminded. I understand. Mu Qing nodded. Then the 2 of them went their separate ways. In less than half a day, the news of Qin Feiyong's death spread in the Central Divine Kingdom. But the news only said that Qin Feiyong had died. For example, how Qin Feiyong had died and where he had died were not mentioned. There was no suspense. When this news came out, it caused a huge uproar in the Central Divine Kingdom. The chief tower master immediately ordered Gongsun Bey to bring the various god envoys to find the person who spread the news. And the next day, like a plague, the news of Qin Feiyong's death quickly spread through the 9 great regions again. The person who spread the news was naturally Mu Qing. Although the central divine kingdom and the 9 regions' teleportation altars were guarded, Mu Qing had a replica of the spatial gate, so there was no need to go through the teleportation altars. For a time everywhere in the Forgotten Continent, a storm was brewing. The Great Qin Empire was the same. The imperial capital. In a certain mountain range, a white-haired old man stood on top of a mountain and looked in the direction of the imperial capital. He wore a pure white robe, and his white hair fluttered in the wind, giving off an otherworldly aura. Whoosh! Not long after, a light figure came from afar and landed in front of the white-haired old man. It was a middle-aged man with sharp eyebrows and a sharp aura. He wore a flaming armor, and there was a Kirin pattern on his chest. That's right. He was from the Kirin army. If Qin Feiyong was here, he would definitely recognize that this Kirin army was Zhang Qianqing. The white-haired old man looked at Zhang Qianqing and asked, "How's the situation?" "Not good. Everyone else was released, but he was locked in the divine prison," Zhang Qianqing said. The white-haired old man's face darkened slightly, and he said, "Tell me the details." According to what I heard, Zhang Qianqing was now from the Kirin army, so it was naturally very easy for him to get information. He knew everything that had happened to Qin Feiyong in the divine prison. Chapter 9:14. Zhang Qianqing asked, "Then what do you plan to do?" "I'm not doing anything." The white-haired old man shook his head. Zhang Qianqing was surprised. The white-haired old man didn't explain. He waved his hand and said, "Go back and continue to monitor the movements of the imperial capital. If there are any abnormalities, report to me immediately." "Okay." Zhang Qianqing nodded. "Wait." The white-haired old man suddenly thought of something and asked, "Have you investigated the situation of the Zhuge family?" "It's still under investigation," Zhang Qianqing said. The white-haired old man said, "Be quick. I have a feeling that the Zhuge family is not normal." "Understood." Zhang Qianqing nodded and then turned to leave. At this moment, it was almost evening. The white-haired old man stood alone at the top of the mountain and looked at the setting sun in the sky. He muttered, "I really want to see how you will treat your own son." Similarly, in an extremely remote place in the Great Qin Empire, there was a stretch of undulating mountain range here. Mountain stream. The vegetation was lush and the rivers were dense. Wild beasts were galloping in the forest, but there was no fighting here. It was extremely peaceful. And at the bottom of one of the giant peaks sat a village. The village occupied an area of about half a mile, and there were thousands of families gathered here. The houses in the village were all built with very ordinary wood. And in front of the village, there was a large field of rice and vegetable gardens. The golden rice swayed in the wind, making the ground seem like it was covered with a layer of dazzling gold leaf. Those emerald green vegetables were like slender and elegant young girls, exuding vitality and youth. Although it was almost evening, many farmers were still busy in the rice fields, catching insects and weeding. They all had simple smiles on their faces. Groups of youths gathered in 2s and 3s, rolling around in the mud and having fun. Her small face was also filled with an innocent smile. The slightly older children gathered around some of the elders and watched them play chess. And the women of each family were either cooking in the house or picking fresh vegetables in the garden to prepare dinner. Green smoke curled up in the sky above the village, showing a peaceful scene. As for their attire, they were all very ordinary. Some of them even had layers of patches on their clothes. In front of one of the wooden buildings, a white-haired old man was sitting on a stool, surrounded by a group of 13 to 14-year-old boys and girls. The old man was dressed in sackcloth and had an amiable expression. He was telling the story of the mountain. A group of young boys and girls squatted on the ground and listened attentively. Occasionally, they would exclaim in surprise, "Whoosh!" Soon, accompanied by the sound of something breaking through the air, a burly man cut through the sky and flew towards the village. This person's upper body was naked. His muscles were well developed, and his skin was very dark, as if it was smeared with charcoal. It was the same for his face. However, seeing the burly man flying in the sky, no one in the village was surprised. It was as if he was used to it. The sackcloth old man also raised his head and looked at the burly man with a smile on his old face. Next, he retracted his gaze and looked at the surrounding young boys and girls. He smiled and said, "Your Uncle Black is back. Let's end today's story here. Second Grandpa, we haven't heard enough yet. Please tell us more." A young boy with mud on his small face ran to the side of the sackcloth old man and pulled his arm. He acted like a spoiled child. "You little brat." The sackcloth old man lightly knocked on the young boy's forehead and said dotingly, "Telling a story is the same as being a person. You have to take it step by step. If you finish it in one go, then it won't be interesting. Do you understand?" The young boy nodded his head as if he understood. Shwa. The burly man landed behind the group of young boys and revealed a simple smile. He scolded, "You little brats, pestering your second grandpa every day. Don't you know that your second grandpa is already old and needs to rest?" A young girl put her hands on her waist and revealed a pair of small canine teeth. She said, "Uncle Black, we don't agree with your words." "Yes." The other young boys all stood up and stared at the burly man with dissatisfaction. "Oh, then tell me, why don't you agree?" The burly man looked at them with interest. "Second grandpa isn't as old as you say." "Yes. Our second grandpa will definitely live to 100 years old." The group of young boys started to chatter. The burly man shook his head and laughed. He stretched out his hand and said, all right, be good and go home. I still have some business to discuss with your second grandpa." One of the young boys asked curiously, "Then tell us first. Is the outside world fun?" "It is." The burly man nodded and smiled. "What fun things are there? Hurry up and tell us. If you don't tell us, we'll stay here and not leave." The group of young boys immediately surrounded the burly man with anticipation on their faces. "Yo, you little brats dare to threaten me? Just you wait. See if I don't smack your little buttocks." The burly man let out a strange cry and revealed a ferocious look. He stretched out his hand to grab a young boy. "Uncle Black is hitting someone. Run. Save me." The group of young boys immediately scattered. As they ran, they howled and made funny faces at the burly man. When the nearby villagers saw this scene, they couldn't help but find it funny. The sackcloth old man also looked at the young boys with a face full of affection. When the young boys ran far away, he retracted his gaze and looked at the burly man. He asked, "How was it?" The burly man's face suddenly darkened. He walked to the side of the sackcloth old man and whispered a few words in the old man's ear. Crack! After the sackcloth old man heard this, his calloused hands suddenly clenched tightly. Moreover, his originally benevolent face also revealed a trace of shocking ruthlessness. But soon, these negative emotions disappeared and he returned to his previous state. "What should we do?" the burly man asked. "The situation has developed to this point. We can no longer sit by and do nothing. Immediately call Lu Zheng here." The sackcloth old man pondered for a while. A determined light flashed in his old eyes as he said in a low voice, "Zheng, quickly come and see your second grandpa." The burly man nodded and turned to the mountain outside the village and shouted. His voice was like a bell, resounding in all directions. "Uncle Black, I'll be right back." The next moment, in the distant mountain, a loud and clear echo resounded. In less than 100 breaths, a young man with dark skin covered in blood flew towards the village while carrying a ferocious beast. The young man's figure was tall and straight, about 1.8 meters. His upper body was exposed, and he only wore a pair of large pants made of animal skin. The ferocious beast on his shoulder was a bull. Its body was more than 10 meters long. There was a fatal wound where its heart was and it was still bleeding. Although this bull was dead, there was still a trace of aura left on its body. And this aura was a trace of holy aura. This was enough to prove that the bull was a holy beast. "Brother Zheng is back. Wow, it's a big beast. We'll have barbecue tonight." When the young boys in the village saw the young man, their faces were full of admiration. Bang! Lu Zheng landed at the entrance of the village and casually threw the bull on the ground. More than a dozen young boys playing at the entrance of the village immediately rushed towards him. Brother Zheng, when you go hunting tomorrow, can you take me with you? Me too, me too. I want to play with those beasts too. A few of the young boys grabbed Lu Zheng's hand and chattered. The other youths surrounded the barbarian bull and exclaimed in surprise. There were even 2 7- or 8-year-old children who were not afraid of the holy aura. They climbed onto the bull and touched it here and there. Their big eyes were full of curiosity. Not now. You're still young. When you grow up, Brother Zheng will definitely take you hunting, okay? Lu Zheng looked at the youths in front of him. His sharp aura was restrained, and he looked like an ordinary youth. A simple smile appeared on his mature face. We'll have to wait a long time for us to grow up. Brother Zheng, just take me with you. I promise I'll listen to you. A young boy raised his hand and made a solemn vow. Little brat. Lu Zheng rubbed the young boy's head, then looked at the old man in sackcloth and the burly man. Although the old man in sackcloth and the burly man looked the same as usual, he sharply noticed that there was something wrong with their expressions. Did something happen in the imperial capital again? He muttered to himself and looked at the group of young boys in front of him. He smiled and said, "All right, go and play. Brother Zheng still has things to do." With that, Lu Zheng turned into a stream of light and quickly landed in front of the old man in sackcloth and the burly man. He chuckled and said, "Why are you in such a hurry to call me back?" The burly man looked at the bloodstains on Lu Zheng's body and said unhappily, "Didn't I tell you again and again to wash off the bloodstains on your body before coming back from hunting? If those children see you like this, it will affect their state of mind. Do you know that?" Lu Zheng felt wronged and said, "Didn't you tell me to come back immediately? You're still quibbling?" The burly man's face stiffened. Lu Zheng waved his hand impatiently and said, all right, stop talking. I was wrong, okay? Tell me, what's the matter?" The burly man glared at him, then looked at the old man in sackcloth. The old man in sackcloth looked at Lu Zheng and asked, Do you know Qin Feiyang?" Lu Zheng pursed his lips and said, "Isn't he that good-for-nothing little cousin? Of course I know." Good for nothing? The burly man's face darkened and he said angrily, "Tell me, how is he good for nothing? See, if he was a good for nothing, he wouldn't have been beaten so badly by the emperor." Lu Zheng said, "Nonsense. He's alone. How can he beat the current emperor? If it were you, you'd be crying for your parents by now." The burly man rolled his eyes at him fiercely. "So what if he's the emperor?" Lu Zheng waved his hand disdainfully. "All right, stop quarreling. Zheng, go to the imperial capital immediately and help your little cousin if you have the chance. It hasn't been easy for him all these years. And our Lu family should think of a way to do something for him." The old man in sackcloth sighed. "What?" Lu Zheng raised his eyebrows and said, "Second grandpa, you have to think about it carefully. If we become enemies with the emperor now, it won't do us any good." "I know. So you have to hide your identity well. Even if it's Fei Yang, you have to hide it from him for the time being. Don't be impulsive no matter what happens. It's best to send me a message first." The old man in sackcloth instructed. Lu Zheng frowned and nodded. "All right, I was just about to go out for a walk. Shall I go now? Be careful," the old man in sackcloth reminded him. "Don't worry. With me there's nothing I can't handle." Chapter 9:15. It's my Lu family's fault. After Lu Zheng left, the linen old man looked at the sky. A trace of self-blame crept up in his old eyes. Seeing this, the burly man beside him could not help but let out a long sigh. His expression was full of helplessness. In the blink of an eye, 5 days passed. The 9th region of the Forgotten Continent. Ice Crystal City. Heavy snow swirled in the air, cold wind howled. The mountains and rivers presented a snow-white world. Inside the city, Purple Cloud House. Back then, Qin Feiyang met the imperial tutor at this Purple Cloud House. And the Purple Cloud House was the closest restaurant to the teleportation altar in the entire Ice Crystal City. The exchange was also nearby. In addition to the cold weather when they were free, everyone liked to drink a few cups to warm their bodies. Therefore, there were more people gathered here than in other restaurants. Among these people there were hunters. There were rich people. Of course, there were also people from the big tribes. The main hall of the restaurant. Dozens of tables were neatly arranged, but most of the guests were in the private rooms upstairs. In the main hall, there were only a dozen tables of guests, and it seemed a bit lonely. And in a corner, a black-clothed youth sat alone at the table, drinking by himself. But while drinking, his gaze always swept towards the entrance of the Purple Cloud House. Every guest that came in and out, he would carefully size them up a few times. The black-clothed youth had been sitting here for a few days, as if he was waiting for someone. From the beginning to the end, he did not say a word. The waiters of the restaurant were already used to it. But every time they saw the black-clothed youth or passed by him, they would be suspicious. What was wrong with this person? In the evening, a group of young people in luxurious clothes entered the Purple Cloud House. There were men and women. They were all famous disciples of the Ice Crystal City, or young talents of the big tribes. They were frequent customers of the Purple Cloud House. Basically, every night they would come here to have fun. Therefore, they also knew about the black-clothed youth's situation. When they saw that the black-clothed youth was still sitting here alone, their expressions were quite strange. A purple-clothed youth slowly walked to the black-clothed youth's table, smiled and asked, "Brother, seeing that you've been here for a few days, is there something bothering you?" The black-clothed youth raised his head and looked at this person, but only smiled slightly, did not say anything, raised his wine cup and drank by himself. Seeing this, the purple-clothed young man didn't ask for a rebuff anymore. He turned around and went upstairs with his companion. Time flew by. Late at night, there were fewer and fewer people in the restaurant. One of the waiters glanced at the black-clothed young man and hesitated for a moment. Then he walked up to him and said with a smile, "Young master, you've been drinking for several days. Why don't I arrange a room for you to rest for a while?" The black-robed young man glanced at the waiter and pondered for a moment. Finally, he put down his wine cup and was about to nod. But at this moment, a white-haired old woman walked into the Purple Cloud House. She stood at the entrance and scanned the hall. The black-clothed youth immediately looked at the white-haired old woman. If one looked carefully, they would discover that there was a strange light in the depths of his dark eyes. Very soon, a brilliant smile crawled onto his face. Then, he looked to the shop assistant and said, "No need, I will leave in a bit." "Leave?" The waiter was stunned for a moment before he nodded and said, "Then take your time. I'll get to work." After saying that, the waiter turned around and saw the white-haired old woman. He immediately went up to her and asked with a smile, "Old lady, do you want to stay here?" Before the white-haired old woman could speak, the black-clothed youth said first, "He's my guest." The waiter was slightly stunned. Then, a trace of understanding crept into his eyes. It turned out that this person was waiting for someone. At the same time, the white-haired old woman also looked at the black-clothed youth with a glimmer of light in her eyes. "I've been waiting for you for a long time," the black-clothed youth said with a smile. The white-haired old woman walked over and sat opposite the black-clothed youth. The waiter followed and asked, "Old lady, do you need anything?" "No need." The white-haired old woman waved her hand. "Okay, you guys take your time." The waiter nodded, turned around and ran away. The white-haired old woman sized up the black-clothed youth and said through voice transmission, "The news of Qin Feiyang's death. Was it you who released it?" "Yes." The black-clothed youth nodded. "That's right. This person was Mu Qing. And this white-haired old woman was just an old woman in the eyes of others." However, Mu Qing had already seen through her true face with his all-seeing eye. It was the mysterious lady. When the mysterious lady saw Mu Qing nodded, she frowned and asked, "Who are you?" Mu Qing smiled and said, "The person who almost died in your hands." It turned out to be the young lord of the Mu clan who opened his all-seeing eye. The mysterious lady suddenly realized and said, "You released the news of Qin Feiyang's death on purpose to lure me out, right?" "Yes. I want to see, is Qin Feiyang important in your eyes? And obviously he still has a certain weight in my heart. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to me. In the past few days, in order to find me, you should have gone to a lot of places." Mu Qing smiled lightly. The mysterious lady frowned and said, "So, Qin Feiyang's death is just a lie you made up?" Her eyes flashed with a cold light. "No, this is true," Mu Qing said in a deep voice. Hearing this, the mysterious lady's heart trembled, and she secretly said, "What the hell is going on? 5 days ago, Qin Feiyang and I went to the Great Qin Empire, but we didn't expect to be discovered by the state preceptor of the Great Qin Empire. Now, he is imprisoned in the prison of the Imperial Palace. If we don't rescue him in time, based on his previous actions in the Great Qin Empire, he will definitely be doomed." Mu Qing said. "Damn it." The mysterious lady clenched her hands and said angrily, "Why did you go to the Great Qin Empire for no reason?" Mu Qing said helplessly, "Look at what you're saying, we are not fools, we must have something to do." The mysterious lady frowned and said, "Then why did you have to take the risk?" She knew Qin Feiyang. He was not a reckless person. For his mother, sigh. "It's already happened, it's useless to ask this now. Now the most important thing is to find a way to rescue him." Mu Qing said, "So this is the purpose of you luring me out. But I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. The Mu clan should know the foundation of the Great Qin Empire better than I do. With my strength, it's impossible to rescue Qin Feiyang from their hands," the mysterious lady said. Mu Qing said, "What if the Mu clan joins in?" The mysterious lady was stunned and looked suspiciously at Mu Qing. "Hasn't the Mu clan always wanted to get rid of him? Why do you want to rescue him now?" "I can't help it. But who told him to take the profound sky flame, frost flame and thunder flame?" Mu Qing said bitterly. The mysterious lady sneered. "So the Mu clan also wants that miracle? Who wouldn't be tempted by such a place? Do you dare say you don't?" Mu Qing said with a smile. The mysterious lady did not deny it. She thought for a moment and nodded. "Okay, in order to save that silly boy, I will cooperate with the Mu clan once, but I have a request, you must let that old man go with you." "Who?" Mu Qing was stunned and asked. "Don't play dumb with me. After dawn, we will meet at the Thunder City in the first area." The mysterious lady looked coldly at Mu Qing, got up and opened a portal, and walked in without looking back. "Wait, even Yiglao knows, who are you?" Mu Qing hurriedly got up, stared at the mysterious lady's back, and secretly asked. Her tone was gloomy. However, the mysterious lady did not say a word and quickly disappeared. "Bastard!" Mu Qing cursed, took out a few hundred gold coins, threw it on the table, and also opened a portal and left. At the same time, the endless sea. The mysterious lady appeared out of thin air above a certain sea. The wind was strong here, and the waves were rolling. The largest wave was even hundreds of feet high, and it could be said to be overwhelming. It was no exaggeration to say that even a battle saint would find it difficult to stand here. However, the mysterious lady stood above the sea like a towering mountain. No matter how strong the wind and waves were, she did not move at all. She took out an illusory form pill, changed back to her original appearance, and looked to the east of the sea. There was an island a few miles away on the sea. It was about a few miles in diameter, and the vegetation was lush. There was actually an island here? This was very illogical, because the strong wind and huge waves from all directions were enough to smash the island into pieces in an instant. But there seemed to be an invisible barrier around the island, blocking the strong wind and huge waves outside. Whoosh! The mysterious lady glanced at the island, then rode the wind and waves and flew to the edge of the island. Then she looked at the center of the island and said loudly, "Old man, an old friend has come to visit. Don't you want to come out and meet her?" In the center of the island stood a giant mountain that was more than 10,000 feet high. From afar, it looked like a giant sword that towered into the clouds. "Old friend." As the mysterious lady's voice fell, a suspicious voice sounded from the top of the mountain. Swish! Immediately after, a brilliant ray of light flew out from the top of the mountain. It was a middle-aged man. He was more than 9 meters tall and wore a snow-white robe that was spotless. His entire body was emitting an extremely strong aura. He landed in front of the mysterious lady and sized her up suspiciously. His long hair draped over his shoulders, his facial features were regular, and his eyes were very special. It was as if they were condensed from ice, sparkling and translucent, flickering with strands of divine light. "Don't you recognize me?" Seeing that the middle-aged man did not speak for a long time, the mysterious lady laughed. "Who are you?" The middle-aged man frowned. "You really forgot about me." The mysterious lady's expression was a little displeased as she said, "In this forgotten continent, only I know of your existence, and only I know that you live here. Who do you think I am?" "What?" The middle-aged man's eyes widened as he stared at the mysterious lady. His eyes shot out a dazzling light. The mysterious madam smiled and said, "Are you thinking that I'm already dead? Why would I appear in front of you now?" The middle-aged man nodded. "It's a long story. I can only say that I was lucky back then and escaped by luck," the mysterious lady said. The middle-aged man was surprised and bewildered. "Then your face. If those people know that I'm still alive, they definitely won't let me off. And I haven't recovered my cultivation back then, so I'm not a match for them. So I can only conceal my identity and change my appearance," the mysterious lady said, and her eyes flickered with ice-cold killing intent. The middle-aged man asked, "Who wanted to kill you back then?" The mysterious lady pondered for a moment and said, "We'll talk about this later. Right now, I want to ask you for a favor." "Heard about it." A trace of helplessness crawled up the middle-aged man's face as he shook his head and said, "You haven't changed at all. You definitely won't come to me for no reason. Tell me, what do you want me to help you with?" The mysterious lady said, "Accompany me to the Great Qin Empire." "The Great Qin Empire?" The middle-aged man frowned. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and said in shock, "You're talking about the Great Qin Empire that was established by Qin Batian?" "That's right." The mysterious lady nodded. "Why are you going there?" The middle-aged man asked as if he was afraid of the Great Qin Empire. "I'm going to save someone. That person is a descendant of Qin Batian. Due to certain reasons, he's currently imprisoned in the Great Qin Empire's God's prison," the mysterious lady said. The middle-aged man's pupils constricted as he frowned and said, "That's not right. Don't you hate Qin Batian? Why are you going to save his descendant now?" "So much nonsense. Just tell me if you're going to help or not," the mysterious lady said impatiently. "I'm talking nonsense? You have to understand that you're the one asking for my help, not the other way around. Also, it's easy for me to kill you now, so it's best if you don't infuriate me." The middle-aged man was slightly angry, and a bone-piercing cold aura emanated from his body. The mysterious lady raised her brows and said helplessly, "All right, I'll give you time to think about it." The middle-aged man withdrew his killing intent and lowered his head to ponder. A short moment later, he raised his head to look at the mysterious lady and said, "I can help you, but I have a condition." "Speak," the mysterious lady said. The middle-aged man said, "The miracle is about to open, right? This time I want to enter the miracle." The mysterious lady's eyes flashed as she shook her head and said, "I knew you hadn't given up, but now I don't have the power to stop you. If you want to go, then go." The middle-aged man smiled. Imperial capital. In the past 5 days, the news of Qin Feiyang being imprisoned in the god's prison had also spread. Without a doubt, the entire imperial capital was in an uproar. It could even be said that it was even more sensational than the last time Qin Feiyang killed the princes at the Treasure Pavilion's auction house. And when they received this news, there were naturally people who were happy. For example, Wan Qiu, Zhuge Mingyang, Feng Yun's father Marquis Qinwu, the current empress, and the mothers of the princes who died at the hands of Qin Feiyang. These were all people who wanted nothing more than to skin Qin Feiyang alive. Of course, they hoped that Qin Feiyang would die a horrible death. Some people were happy, but there were also people who were worried. For example, Ren Wushuang and the others, although they had obtained freedom, but these few days they had not been at ease. They had thought of countless ways, but none of them could save Qin Feiyang. In addition to these people, there was also a small number of people who felt sorry for Qin Feiyang's encounter. Sun Dahai was one of them. After spending so much time with Qin Feiyang, he understood Qin Feiyang's character. Although he was not a good person, he would definitely not do anything outrageous. In the end, it was the hatred in his heart that harmed him. If he could give up this hatred, then all of this would not have happened. But then again, could this hatred be let go? Definitely not. Not to mention Qin Feiyang. Anyone who encountered such an encounter would not be able to let go. This was a dead knot that could not be untied. Early the next morning, the calm sky above the Black Dragon Pool suddenly surged. Following closely, the The void shattered, the mountains and rivers trembled, and an ancient stone door appeared. Soon, 5 figures walked out of the stone door one after another. The leader was Yiglao, the mysterious madam, and the middle-aged man from the endless sea. Next was the Mu family's great ancestor and second ancestor Mu Qing. Qing go to the imperial city first and inquire about Qin Feiyang's current situation. When my divine power recovers, we will go to the divine prison. Yiglao glanced at the mountains below, turned to look at Mu Qing, and at the same time put away the space-time gate. Okay. Chapter 9:16. When the portal dissipated, Yiglao looked at the mysterious lady and the middle-aged man and said with a smile, "This should be your first time in the Great Qin Empire. Why don't you take a look around?" Whether it was the mysterious lady or the middle-aged man, they were both very mysterious. If the two of them stayed here, he would not be able to recover his divine power in peace. The mysterious lady glanced at Yiglao and looked at the middle-aged man. "Since someone doesn't want to see us, then let's not stay here and look for trouble. Let's go." The middle-aged man nodded. Whoosh! The two of them immediately rushed into the sky, turned into a stream of light and quickly disappeared into the sky. After Yiglao watched the two of them disappear, his old eyes flashed and landed on a mountain top with the Mu family's great ancestor and second ancestor. "You two protect me and carefully pay attention to the movements around," Yiglao told the two of them and sat cross-legged on the ground. The pores all over his body opened to absorb the essence of heaven and earth, and began to recover his divine power. And in the afternoon of the same day, an explosive news suddenly spread like wildfire in the imperial capital. 3 days later, at noon, Qin Feiyang was taken to the central square of the first city and beheaded in public. How could this be? The imperial capital that had not yet calmed down was once again boiling. People were surprised and somewhat in disbelief, because since the establishment of the Great Qin Empire, there had never been an emperor's son who was beheaded in public. Qin Feiyang was the first. Of course, beheading in public was not something that had never happened before, but it was usually the kind of unforgivable outlaws. And Qin Feiyang, although he killed the princes in the past, but in the end it was only the emperor's family matter. Was there a need to behead him in public? Not to mention, even if Qin Feiyang was abolished, the royal blood flowing in his body was a fact that could not be erased. The emperor should not be so heartless. However, after many inquiries, they learned that this order was actually given by the emperor himself. People suddenly felt incredible to the extreme. This supreme emperor, how much did he hate Qin Feiyang? In the evening, a young man in black entered the divine prison. This person had a dignified appearance. His body was 7 feet tall and straight like an iron pine tree. He held a folding fan in his hand and looked very elegant. There was a small sword symbol on his chest, indicating that he was a disciple of the temple. He stood in front of the tower and looked at the empty corridor in silence. A moment later, he took a deep breath and said indifferently, "Qin Feiyang, come out for a chat?" After a long while, Qin Feiyang finally appeared. "You still dare to look for me?" He sized up the black-clothed young man with a murderous look in his eyes. This person was none other than Zhuge Mingyang. Zhuge Mingyang waved his folding fan and smiled faintly. "Now that you're a prisoner, why wouldn't I dare?" Whoosh! Before he finished speaking, Qin Feiyang had already appeared in front of Zhuge Mingyang. The distance between the two was less than half a meter. Qin Feiyang raised the corner of his mouth and said, "Even if I'm a prisoner, I can still kill you. Is that so? Since you're so confident, why don't you give it a try?" Zhuge Mingyang was as steady as Mount Tai without the slightest fear, but there was a hint of mockery on his face. Qin Feiyang stretched out his arm and grabbed Zhuge Mingyang's head. Boom! Zhuge Mingyang smiled disdainfully. The next moment, a terrifying pressure roared out from his body and rushed toward Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang was shocked and quickly retreated. This pressure actually carried a hint of Saint's aura. "Come on." Zhuge Mingyang waved his folding fan slowly and looked at Qin Feiyang contemptuously. Qin Feiyang stabilized his body and looked up and down at Zhuge Mingyang for a moment. He suddenly said, "No wonder you dare to be so fearless. You've already broken through to the Battle Saint realm." Surprised? Zhuge Mingyang asked with a smile. Qin Feiyang shook his head. With Zhuge Mingyang's talent, it was not strange for him to be able to break through to the Battle Saint realm in these few years. But if Zhuge Mingyang thought that he had the right to be arrogant in front of him after breaking through to the Battle Saint realm, then he was gravely mistaken. Qin Feiyang's mind moved, and the double-winged snow eagle appeared, saying, "Kill him." "No problem." The double-winged snow eagle laughed, and a terrifying saint's aura broke out from its body. Saint Beast. The smile on Zhuge Mingyang's face suddenly froze, and a trace of panic appeared in his eyes. Although he had broken through to the Battle Saint realm, he was only a one-star Battle Saint, and the aura emitted by this snow eagle was more than a few times stronger than his. Obviously, its cultivation level was much higher than his. Kit, going against Qin Feiyang is the worst decision you've ever made in your life. The double-winged snow eagle laughed cruelly, and swept towards Zhuge Mingyang like lightning, its eyes emitting a cold light. Zhuge Mingyang retreated in panic. Qin Feiyang, if you dare to kill Zhuge Mingyang, today will be the day you die. However, at this time, a voice filled with killing intent came from outside. The owner of the voice was the black-robed old man who was guarding outside. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows, and shouted at the double-winged snow eagle, "Come back." The double-winged snow eagle also looked at the door angrily, and quickly retreated to Qin Feiyang's side. Zhuge Mingyang finally let out a sigh of relief, but his whole body was already drenched in cold sweat. Qin Feiyang looked at him indifferently, and said, "I thought you were very powerful, but it turns out that you're just as..." The sarcasm in his words was undisguised. Zhuge Mingyang was a bit angry, but suddenly he seemed to think of something, and a bright smile appeared on his face. He smiled and said, "Do you know why I'm here today?" Qin Feiyang was silent. "I'm here to tell you that today His Majesty has ordered that 3 days later at noon, in the central square of the first district, you will be beheaded in public. In other words, you only have 3 days left." Zhuge Mingyang pursed his lips and smiled. Boom! Hearing this, Qin Feiyang was like a bolt from the blue, and his body and mind trembled. He was actually going to be beheaded in public? Being beheaded in public by your own father? You must be very sad, right? Zhuge Mingyang joked. This sentence, no doubt, sprinkled a handful of salt on Qin Feiyang's wound. Qin Feiyang painfully closed his eyes, his hands tightly clenched together. Because he used too much strength, his nails had already pierced the flesh of his palms. Drip! Fresh blood dripped down drop by drop onto the ground, splashing into the air. Although my talent is not as good as yours, I'm better than you in one thing. I have a father who loves me. No matter what I want, he will do everything possible to give it to me. Since I was young, he has never scolded me, let alone ordered me to be killed. To be honest, sometimes I really sympathize with you. Back then, when you were born, you were the pride of the imperial capital, and were doted on by everyone. You even took away my title as the #1 demon. At that time, although you were still young, you were already the idol of countless people. But now you've fallen to this point like a rat on the street, hated by everyone, Zhuge Mingyang said with a smile, and there was a strong sense of satisfaction in his words. So now you're here to laugh at me? Qin Feiyang finally opened his eyes, and the pain between his eyebrows had disappeared, replaced by calmness. Zhuge Mingyang was surprised. How could he calm down so quickly? Qin Feiyang said again, "Did you think that after hearing what you said, I would roar in anger and unwillingness?" Zhuge Mingyang did not answer, but his expression proved everything. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, "If that's the case, then I'm afraid you'll be disappointed, because I've already seen through all of this." Seen through? Zhuge Mingyang sneered. "Whether you've really seen through it or not, you know best in your heart." Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Don't always talk about me, let's talk about you. Don't you think that you're very pitiful?" Zhuge Mingyang smiled. "I have a perfect family, and I have extraordinary talent. What's there to be pitiful about? Really? Then tell me, why did you work so hard for the first prince?" Qin Feiyang teased. Zhuge Mingyang raised his eyebrows. "I'll tell you why. It's all because of power and status. No matter how good your talent is, no matter how strong you are, in the face of the supreme imperial power, you have to humbly bow your head. To put it in simpler terms, No matter how you jump around, you can't escape the fate of being a slave for the rest of your life. Qin Feiyong smiled. Zhuge Mingyang's eyes darkened, as if Qin Feiyong had really poked his sore spot. A slave has to have the consciousness of a slave. Although I'm no longer a prince now, I'm born to be a level higher than you. Do you know why? The reason is that the bloodline of the first emperor flows in my body, and this is something you can never compare to. Qin Feiyong laughed. He knew that Zhuge Mingyang was a very prideful person, and he would definitely go crazy after hearing these words. As expected, Zhuge Mingyang's face became gloomier, and his eyes were filled with a strong murderous intent. Seeing this, the double-winged snow eagle laughed and did not hide the gloating in his eyes. He joked, "What else do you want to say? We're all ears." Zhuge Mingyang glanced at the man and the eagle, and suddenly laughed. "Laugh all you want. Anyway, you don't have much time left. Besides, after you die, I'll take good care of your friends." Then he added with a cold smile in his eyes, and the word "take good care of" was especially emphasized. Then he turned around and left. Qin Feiyong narrowed his eyes and said, "If you dare to touch a hair of my friends, I'll let the whole Zhuge family die with them. Also, I may not die. Then we'll wait and see." Zhuge Mingyang smiled without looking back and left the god's prison. He may not die. What a childish thing to say. No one who was ordered to be killed by the emperor could survive. Looking at the stone door slowly closing, Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed coldly, and he went to the castle with the double-winged snow eagle. In the castle, Lu Hong and the others looked at him worriedly. Qin Feiyong said with a faint smile, "Don't worry, such a small thing can't hurt me." Everyone looked at each other, and the worry in their hearts grew stronger. If it was someone else they might believe it. But they knew Qin Feiyong too well. Don't be fooled by Qin Feiyong's indifferent attitude right now. He was definitely very sad in his heart. Chapter 9:17. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. It was still dark. The people from the various districts swarmed towards the first district, including the disciples of the Divine Hall. Even the cities outside the imperial city had countless people rushing over to watch the show. There was a long queue at the fixed teleportation gates that led to the first district. "Brother, I have something urgent to do in the first district. Can I cut the queue?" Something urgent? Look at everyone. Who doesn't have something urgent? Go to the back of the line. Don't cause public anger. Although it was still early, everyone wanted to get to the first district as soon as possible. Of course, there were also some smart people who had entered the first district as early as yesterday or the day before. As for the first district, it was no surprise that all the streets were packed. The central square was located in the center of the first district. It was thousands of feet wide. The ground was covered with hard blue stones. Traces of weathering could be seen everywhere. Early in the morning, a group of invincible Black Army soldiers arrived at the square. There were more than 100 of them. Each of them emitted a holy aura. They stood at the edge of the square with sky halberds in their hands. They stopped anyone who wanted to enter the square. They were full of murderous intent. The square was surrounded by a sea of people. There were several luxurious restaurants near the square. The status of these restaurants in the imperial capital was not as high as the Fragrant Moon brothel, and their business was not as good as the Fragrant Moon brothels. However, since the news that Qin Feiyong was going to be beheaded in the central square spread, a large number of people rushed here. Because these restaurants were very close to the central square, standing on the top few floors, they could clearly see the situation in the central square. So last night these restaurants were full. At this moment, in these restaurants, all the rooms near the central square had their windows wide open. In front of the windows there were many people. There were men and women, old and young. These people were all influential figures, including the various dukes. In the west, there was a restaurant called the Moon Inn. In a private room on the top floor, more than a dozen young men and women gathered together. They had outstanding looks and extraordinary temperaments. The aura they exuded was also very strong. There was a small sword symbol on the chest of their clothes. One of the young men in black said with a smile, "It's the first time in 100 years that the imperial city is so lively." "Yes, it's all thanks to Qin Feiyong." A woman in white immediately said with a smile. "Creak." At this moment, The door was pushed open. A young man in black walked into the private room. It was Zhuge Mingyang. Brother Zhuge. The group of young men and women in the private room saw Zhuge Mingyang's arrival. Zhuge Mingyang waved his fan and said with a smile, "Everyone has come early. The son of an emperor has been beheaded. Such a good show, of course we have to come early to watch." Someone laughed. Zhuge Mingyang smiled and walked to the window. Looking at the central square, he muttered to himself, "Didn't you tell me that you wouldn't die for sure? Why hasn't there been any movement yet?" Zhuge Mingyang turned to look at the man and nodded with a smile. "Did you tell Qin Feiyang that he would be beheaded today?" Immediately, the group of people looked at him curiously. Of course. Zhuge Mingyang nodded with a smile. How did he react? Was he very sad? Very desperate? Very painful? The crowd asked anxiously. Zhuge Mingyang shook his head and sighed. On the contrary, he was not sad, but humiliated me. The group of people looked at each other. At the same time, in the private room of a restaurant in the north, a group of people gathered. But they were different from Zhuge Mingyang and the others. Their faces were full of anxiety and worry. The leaders were the old master and Zhu Yu. Ren Wushuang, Tan Wu Shunmei and Lu Xingchen were also there. In the south, in front of the window of a private room, a white-haired old man was also standing. He had his hands behind his back and his temperament was outstanding. He was dressed in white without a speck of dust. But he was wearing a mask on his face, so his face couldn't be seen clearly. He looked mysterious. At the same time, in a restaurant in the east, 6 figures stood side by side, looking at the central square among the sea of people in silence. It was Mu Qing and the others. After a while, the mysterious lady withdrew her gaze and looked at Mu Qing. She asked, "Did Qin Feiyang send you any messages these days?" "No. Maybe he doesn't know that we have sneaked into the capital. It's also possible that the prison of God can cut off the connection with the image crystal," Mu Qing said. The great ancestor of the Mu clan sneered. "Isn't that good? When he is desperate, we will appear again and give him a surprise. I'm afraid that not only Qin Feiyang, but also the emperor and the state preceptor will be full of surprises." The second ancestor of the Mu clan followed, his eyes flashing. "That's not important." Mu Qing shook her head and looked at the mysterious lady. She smiled faintly. "I'm just looking forward to Qin Feiyang's expression when he sees that we joined hands with you to save him." "Boring," the mysterious lady said expressionlessly and continued to look at the central square. At the same time, in the depths of the imperial palace, there was a magnificent palace. Above the entrance of the palace hung a golden plaque. 3 bold and vigorous words were written on it, as if they were carved with iron hooks and silver, releasing a shocking aura. Bright Heaven Palace. Around the palace, there were Kirin army holding halberds standing straight like iron pine. At the gate, there were 2 maids and 2 eunuchs standing respectfully. In front of the palace there was a garden. In the garden the grass and trees were green, hundreds of flowers were blooming. There were small bridges, flowing water, rockery and pavilions. And every intersection in the garden was also guarded by the Kirin army. At this moment, on a grassland, the emperor was playing with a child. This child was only about 2 years old. He had just learned to walk not long ago and was staggering. The child and the emperor were chasing back and forth on the grassland. Joyful laughter filled every corner of the garden. At the side, there was a woman in palace attire. She was draped in phoenix clouds and had a phoenix crown on her head. The phoenix robe on her body was full of noble aura. In this imperial palace, the only person who could dress like this was the empress. And this woman was the first prince's mother. That child was the dragon son that she and the emperor had given birth to in the past 2 years. Looking at the happy father and son, the woman's face was full of smiles. At the same time, on a small path outside the garden, a white-clothed woman was running towards them. "Empress, your injuries have just healed. Run slower." There were 2 maids behind her. They chased after the woman in white and shouted anxiously. However, the woman in white did not seem to hear them. Her footsteps became faster and faster. Her slightly pale face was full of anxiety. She was Qin Feiyang's mother. These few days passed. With the help of the fire of life, her injuries had healed. and she had fused with the fire of life. Now, like Qin Feiyang and Fatso, she had an immortal body. And now she came to Bright Heaven Palace to find the emperor to plead for Qin Feiyang. In fact, this was not the first time she came. These days she came several times a day. But every time she was stopped outside by the Kirin army. But this time, she had great determination. She would not give up until she saw the emperor. Because Qin Feiyang was going to be beheaded today. If she did not see the emperor, there would be no turning back. Again. At the entrance of the garden there were 2 Kirin army guards. Seeing the woman in white from afar, they could not help but frown. Soon, the woman in white came to the entrance of the garden. She glanced at the 2 Kirin army and wanted to barge in. "Empress, you can't." The 2 Kirin army quickly reached out to stop the woman in white. "I must see him today," the woman in white said. "I really can't. His Majesty said that I have to accompany the little prince for the whole day, and will not see anyone. Empress, please don't make things difficult for us, okay?" The 2 Kirin army said with a difficult expression. Although the woman in white was not in a good situation now, she was after all the empress. So these Kirin army did not dare to be too presumptuous. "Empress, let's go back. His Majesty knows why you are here, so he will not see you." The 2 maids caught up and stood in front of the woman in white, persuading her in a low voice. "I won't go." The woman in white shook her head. In the garden, the emperor and the empress also noticed the woman in white. However, the emperor just casually glanced at her, and then retracted his gaze and continued to play with the little prince. And the empress' mouth was pursed with a hint of mockery. At the same time, looking at the emperor and the little prince laughing and talking, the woman in white could not help but feel a strong anger rising in her heart. "Your Majesty, he is your child. Feiyang is also your child. You can't be so biased," the woman in white cried. The emperor was still indifferent. The empress glanced at the emperor, then looked at the woman in white and said with a smile, "Sister, you are wrong. When Qin Feiyang was expelled from the imperial palace, he no longer had anything to do with our imperial family. Now he is just an outsider." "Shut up." The woman in white suddenly looked at her with a cold light in her eyes. The empress' pupils shrank and she looked a little scared. In the past, when Qin Feiyang's mother was the empress, she was just a concubine. When she saw Qin Feiyang's mother, she had to bow. When Qin Feiyang's mother was on the throne, she was a person who acted swiftly and decisively. In addition, she was very strong and had the powerful Lu family behind her. Therefore, all the concubines in the imperial palace were very afraid of her, including the empress now. Although their identities were changed now, it was difficult to get rid of the shadow accumulated in the past. However, hearing the woman in white scolding the empress, the emperor frowned and looked up at the woman in white. He said, "The one who should shut up is you. Don't pester endlessly and wear down my patience." The woman in white trembled and tears of grievance flowed from her eyes. The empress waved her hand impatiently and said, "Go away. Don't hinder us here." With the emperor backing her, she naturally would not be afraid and put on an overbearing attitude. The woman in white glanced at her and then looked at the emperor. She knelt on the ground and said with grief and indignation, "You have killed Feiyang twice. You can't be so heartless. This is unfair to Feiyang. If you don't take back your order today, I will kneel here and never get up." "Then you can kneel there." Chapter 9:18. The woman in white did not get up. After fusing with the flame of life, her slightly aged face exuded vitality once more. Her skin was crystal clear, and her hair was like a waterfall. However, at this moment, her face was full of helplessness. The 2 Kirin army soldiers and 2 maids were trying to persuade her, but she did not seem to hear them. Her eyes were full of determination. Time passed by breath. At this moment, whether it was Ren Wushuang's group, Zhuge Mingyang's group, or other unrelated people, they all felt that time was passing very slowly. It had only been a single morning, but it felt as long as a few decades. Finally, noon was coming. It was early summer and the weather was not too hot. However, many people were already sweating. Everyone looked at the central square and gradually quieted down. Their hands were clenched tightly together. A tense atmosphere pervaded the air. In fact, many people did not know what they were nervous about. This was about Qin Feiyang's execution. What did it have to do with them? Why were they nervous? However, they still felt that they were out of breath. It was very oppressive. Whoosh! Suddenly, a white-haired old man descended on the square. Next to him was a middle-aged man in golden armor. The moment the imperial tutor appeared, there was a vast and mighty pressure that surged out in all directions. Greetings, Grand Master. Under the pressure, the people gathered around the square, including the invincible Black Army, were all afraid and knelt down to worship him. Yes. The Grand Master nodded and then looked at the man in golden armor next to him. The man in golden armor quickly took out a wooden armchair from his cosmos bag and placed it on the ground. The Grand Master waved his sleeves and turned around to sit on the wooden armchair. The man in golden armor took out a tea table, a teapot and teacups. After placing them one by one, he began to make tea for the Grand Master. The man in golden armor was none other than the commander of the invincible Black Army. This old bastard really knows how to enjoy life. In a restaurant in the south, a dark-skinned young man in linen clothes stood in front of the window. He looked at the Grand Master who was sitting on the wooden armchair with a cold look in his eyes. It was Lu Zheng. Whoosh! Suddenly, two more people suddenly appeared in the room. Lu Zheng sensed their auras and turned to look at them. He said unhappily, Uncle Hey, second grandpa, why are you only here now? Isn't it supposed to be executed at noon? What's the hurry? The burly man rolled his eyes, walked to the window and asked, what's the situation now? Little cousin hasn't appeared yet, but, Lu Zheng frowned when he said this. But what? The burly man and the sackcloth old man looked at him suspiciously. Yesterday I had nothing to do. So I went to the nearby restaurants and found a lot of unfathomable auras. I'm wondering if this aura has anything to do with my little cousin. Lu Zheng frowned. Unfathomable? The burly Dao and the linen old man looked at each other, their eyes filled with bewilderment. It's hard to explain. Take a look for yourselves. Lu Zheng took out a gray stone. This stone was simple and unadorned. At first glance it looked like an ordinary pebble. However, there were extremely complicated lines on it. Those lines were like the meridians of a human. Lu Zheng grabbed the gray stone and slowly injected a wisp of battle qi into it. Immediately, an invisible ripple overflowed from the gray stone and spread out in all directions. This wave was colorless, odorless, and had no aura at all. No one noticed it. Suddenly, the gray stone trembled slightly. Immediately after, the lines on the stone glowed with a faint golden light. What? This is the light of gods. The linen old man and the burly man looked at the golden light and trembled. The burly man shook his head and said, no, this should be the light of gods of the state preceptor. But before he finished speaking, the gray stone in Lu Zheng's hand trembled again. There's actually more than one god. The burly man's pupils contracted. His eyes filled with disbelief. Buzz. However, it was not over yet. The gray stone trembled a few more times. 4 gods. The burly man's eyes widened in anger. How is this possible? He looked at Lu Zheng and said, is there something wrong with the heavens I jade? The corner of Lu Zheng's mouth twitched fiercely. He rolled his eyes at the burly man and put away the gray stone. The linen old man glanced at the crowd outside the window and shook his head. There's nothing wrong with the heavens I jade. Then apart from the state preceptor, who are the other 3 gods? Does our great Qin Empire have so many gods? The burly man was surprised. They're not gods either. From the analysis of the light emitted by the heavens I jade, they should be fake gods like the state preceptor. However, the identity of these people is indeed confusing. The linen old man frowned. Lu Zheng said, second grandpa, these are all small questions. The key is why are they here? The linen old man pondered for a while and said, I think it should be related to Feiyang. Otherwise, why are they here? Lu Zheng was taken aback and asked, so, we don't have to do anything today? I guess so. The linen old man nodded, but he was not sure. Lu Zheng looked at the linen old man and sighed. If that's the case, then we don't have to disturb the big boss. Yes. The old man can't withstand such a storm now. The burly man also nodded in agreement. On his rough face, There was a trace of worry that could not be dispelled. "They're here." At this moment, the linen old man suddenly looked at the sky above the square. His old eyes flashed. Lu Zheng and the burly man immediately calmed down and looked in the direction of the linen old man's gaze. At the same time, the people in the nearby restaurants and the people around the square all looked up at the void above the square. The state preceptor also looked up, but he immediately withdrew his gaze. He picked up the tea that the invincible Black Army commander had brewed for him and tasted it. Whoosh! Under the gaze of thousands of people, two figures appeared in the sky above the square. One of them was the commander of the Kirin army. The other was naturally Qin Feiyang. However, at this moment, Qin Feiyang's hands and feet were tied with a black iron chain. The iron chain was as thick as a baby's arm. It shone with a black light and emitted an obscure aura. It was an iron chain made of divine gravity iron, which could imprison people's battle chi and strength. The commander of the Kirin army landed in the center of the square with Qin Feiyang. Although he had been locked in the prison of God for several days, he had been resting in the castle. Therefore, his mental appearance was the same as usual. The only difference was that his eyes were colder than before. He stood in the center of the square and looked around at the crowd. He shook his head and said, "So many people have come to watch. You really think highly of me, Qin Feiyang." The state preceptor chuckled as he sipped his tea. "That's right. You're the first person to have shocked the entire imperial capital during the execution. Don't you feel proud?" Qin Feiyang turned around and looked at the state preceptor. He looked very calm. "Are you afraid?" The state preceptor looked up at him and asked. Qin Feiyang smiled and walked toward the state preceptor. As he walked, the iron chain on his feet made clanking sounds. You can still be so calm when you're about to die. This courage alone is enough to make people respect you. In the pavilion where Zhuge Mingyang was, a young man in white looked at Qin Feiyang with a trace of admiration in his eyes. "Humph, this is not calmness. This is stubbornness." Zhuge Mingyang snorted with a strong sense of hatred in his eyes. "Brother Zhuge, aren't you always calm no matter what you encounter? Why do you look a little anxious now?" The young man in white was stunned and looked at Zhuge Mingyang in confusion. Hearing this, the others also looked at Zhuge Mingyang suspiciously. Indeed, it was as the white-clothed youth had said. When facing Qin Feiyang, Zhuge Mingyang had become somewhat different from before. To put it nicely, he didn't have his usual demeanor. To put it bluntly, Zhuge Mingyang's current behavior was a little despicable. Was it because of the crown prince? But that didn't make sense. Zhuge Mingyang used to work for the crown prince, but that was all. Even if the crown prince was killed by Qin Feiyang, Zhuge Mingyang wouldn't lose anything. Was it necessary for him to hate Qin Feiyang so much? Or could it be that the relationship between Zhuge Mingyang and the crown prince wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface? But regarding this, Zhuge Mingyang didn't give any explanation. In the plaza, Qin Feiyang walked over to the imperial tutor's side and looked at the Iron Black Corps commander, who was standing there motionlessly, as he calmly said, "You haven't forgotten about how you ambushed me in the Forgotten Continent, right?" The invincible Black Army's general's eyes slightly trembled. Although Qin Feiyang was now a prisoner, and although he was stronger than Qin Feiyang, when he looked at Qin Feiyang's eyes, he couldn't help but feel a sense of fear. "Looks like you haven't forgotten." Qin Feiyang chuckled and looked down at the state preceptor. He said with a smile, "I haven't eaten or drunk for a few days. My mouth is a little dry." "Impudent. Do you know what kind of situation you're in right now?" The invincible Black Army's general shouted. The state preceptor raised his head and looked at the invincible Black Army's general. He said unhappily, "Is it your turn to speak?" "I'm sorry." The invincible Black Army's general quickly lowered his head. "If you want to flatter someone, you have to look at the right time. You can't do it at any time." Qin Feiyang looked at him mockingly. "You're right." The state preceptor nodded and smiled. He didn't give the invincible Black Army's general any face. When the invincible Black Army's general failed to sneak attack on Qin Feiyang, he was very angry. He raised his head and looked at the sky. There was still a little time before noon. Then, he glanced at the invincible Black Army's general and said, "Why aren't you pouring tea for His Highness?" "Yes." The invincible Black Army's general quickly took out an armchair from his cosmos bag and placed it next to Qin Feiyang. Then, he quickly took out a teacup and poured tea for Qin Feiyang respectfully. Qin Feiyang sat down on the wooden armchair, picked up the teacup and took a sip from it. The tea tasted good and left a nice fragrance in his mouth. The state preceptor smiled and asked, "How is it?" "Not bad." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Haha." Chapter 919. Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, life is more important than anything else." The state preceptor asked with a smile, "Then tell this old man frankly, have you ever regretted what you did?" "What things?" "Killing the princes? Or challenging the emperor? Or going against you?" Qin Feiyang asked back. The state preceptor smiled faintly and said, "Do you still need this old man to explain? You should be well aware of it." Qin Feiyang sighed softly and said, "I'm not good at guessing riddles." The state preceptor shook his head and laughed. The two were like old friends, sitting in the square drinking tea and chatting, without any sense of nervousness. In the private room, the linen-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyang from afar, his old face full of admiration, and suddenly said, "What?" Lu Zheng turned his head and looked at the linen-clothed old man suspiciously. The linen-clothed old man asked, "If it were you in such a desperate situation, would you still be so calm?" Lu Zheng fell silent. In all honesty, he couldn't do it. Not to mention him, perhaps no one could be as calm as Qin Feiyang in the face of the imminent beheading crisis. He had to admit that he had underestimated this little cousin of his all this time. In the square, the state preceptor looked up at the sun again, put down the teacup and looked at Qin Feiyang, and said with a faint smile, "It's almost time. If you have any last words, quickly say them." Qin Feiyang said, "No last words, but I have a wish." "What wish?" the state preceptor asked. Qin Feiyang said, "Can you tear off your disguise and let me see your original appearance?" The state preceptor raised his eyebrows without a trace. Qin Feiyang raised the corner of his mouth and said jokingly, "It must be very tiring to pretend to be a good old man in front of the world all day long." The state preceptor chuckled, but his smile had become a little stiff. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "It seems that my words have made you very unhappy. Why should this old man care about the words of a dying man?" The state preceptor smiled indifferently. "Die. To me, death is not scary. The scariest thing is that I won't be able to see the person I miss the most before I die." Qin Feiyang slowly got up and looked in the direction of the imperial palace. A hint of mockery flashed across the imperial tutor's eyes as he thought to himself, "Don't look forward to it. Your mother won't come." Qin Feiyang frowned. The imperial preceptor sent a voice transmission. "You still don't know, right? In order to plead for you, your mother has been kneeling in Bright Sky Palace for an entire morning." "What?" Qin Feiyang trembled both physically and mentally. In the depths of his calm heart, a monstrous rage suddenly surged. Bright Heaven Palace was no longer the Bright Heaven Palace of the past. It was now the residence of the current Celestial Empress and the little prince. For him, his mother had actually knelt in Bright Heaven Palace. He could imagine how much humiliation his mother had suffered. He couldn't stand it. "Are you very angry? But unfortunately you can't do anything now. But don't worry, after you die and I get Changshui in the castle, I won't make things difficult for her. At most, I'll just cripple her cultivation." The imperial preceptor secretly sent a voice transmission. After that, he no longer paid attention to Qin Feiyang. He picked up the teacup and tasted it with a smile. Qin Feiyang suddenly lowered his head and stared at the imperial preceptor. His eyes flashed with shocking killing intent. "The time has come." At this time, the commander of the invincible Black Army said indifferently. Qin Feiyang closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened his eyes again, his eyes were dead silent. "Let's go." The commander of the invincible Black Army stepped forward and grabbed Qin Feiyang's shoulder from behind. "Get your dirty hands off me. I can walk by myself," Qin Feiyang said coldly. He slapped the commander's arm away and strode toward the center of the square. The commander of the invincible Black Army sneered and turned to look at the imperial preceptor. "My lord, this subordinate will personally behead Qin Feiyang." "Okay." The imperial preceptor nodded. The commander of the invincible Black Army's eyes flashed with killing intent. He quickly caught up with Qin Feiyong and said to himself, I didn't want to target you, but I have no choice. Qin Feiyong said expressionlessly, just say what you want to say. Don't beat around the bush. I know you too well. If you don't die, I'll definitely die in your hands, because I almost killed you in the past. So, I can only feel at ease if I personally behead you. The commander of the invincible Black Army said. You're quite aware of it. Qin Feiyong was surprised. How can you survive in the Imperial Palace if you're not aware of it? The commander of the invincible Black Army sneered. The Kirin Army's commander had been standing in the center of the square. Seeing Qin Feiyong and the commander of the invincible Black Army, he slightly frowned but didn't say anything. Kneel. When Qin Feiyong walked to the center of the square, the commander of the invincible Black Army shouted with a cold face, Kneel? In this world, except for my mother, no one is qualified to make me kneel. Qin Feiyong said proudly. Stubborn. The commander of the invincible Black Army was furious. He reached out his hand and grabbed the back of Qin Feiyong's head, pushing Qin Feiyong down to the ground. However, Qin Feiyong was like an iron pine, standing proudly on the ground. His legs didn't bend at all. Seeing this, the Kirin Army's commander couldn't bear it. He turned his head and looked at the State Master, but found that the State Master pretended not to see it. Kneel. The commander of the invincible Black Army was even angrier. He kicked Qin Feiyong's calf. Qin Feiyong immediately bent his legs and kneeled on the ground. The commander of the invincible Black Army showed a trace of disdain. How dare you be so arrogant in front of me? Do you really think you're still the 14th prince? However, when Qin Feiyong's knees were about to touch the ground, Qin Feiyong stood up abruptly. What? The commander of the invincible Black Army was stunned. Then he became angry and kicked Qin Feiyong's legs again. Stop! The Kirin Army's commander couldn't stand it anymore. He stepped beside Qin Feiyong and pushed the commander of the invincible Black Army away with his palm. What are you doing? The commander of the invincible Black Army kept stepping back. After he stabilized his body, he stared at the Kirin Army in shock and anger. Although Qin Feiyong has been removed from his position as a prince, he still has the blood of His Majesty in his body. Don't you think you're being too careless? The Kirin Army's commander said with a sullen face. The commander of the invincible Black Army raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, His Majesty has said that he is no longer a member of the royal family. Now you're trying to stop me. Are you trying to give him a chance to escape? How dare you? Who gave you the guts to speak to this commander like this? The Kirin Army's commander was furious. Although they were both commanders, the commander of the Kirin Army had a higher position in the Imperial Palace than the commander of the invincible Black Army. If it was before, he would have slapped the commander of the invincible Black Army. But it was different now. Now that the commander of the invincible Black Army was with the State Preceptor, he had to consider the State Preceptor's face. Even so, the commander of the invincible Black Army was a bit scared when he saw the Kirin Army's commander was angry. The Kirin Army's commander is right. Qin Feiyong has the blood of the emperor in his body. Let's leave him some dignity. The State Preceptor glanced at the Kirin Army's commander and said, Yes. The commander of the invincible Black Army bowed and replied. Then, he looked at the Kirin Army's commander and said coldly, Are you satisfied now? Can you step aside? The Kirin Army's commander raised his eyebrows and walked away. However, he secretly sent a voice transmission to Qin Feiyong. Why don't you escape now? Now that they had left the prison of God, Qin Feiyong could hide in the castle and slowly find a chance to escape. But now, Qin Feiyong didn't seem to have such a plan. If I escape now, they will use my mother to threaten me again. I don't want to put my mother in danger again. Qin Feiyong said to himself, Alas! If Her Majesty could hear this, I believe she would be very happy. Don't worry. I will take good care of your friends in the future. I will also persuade His Majesty to treat Her Majesty better. The Kirin Army's commander sighed deeply and sent a voice transmission. Thank you. Qin Feiyong thanked him secretly. Then he glanced at the crowd in the square and slowly closed his eyes. At this moment he didn't fear death at all. He was very calm and ordinary. He even felt relieved from the bottom of his heart. Since he was 10 years old, he had been struggling to survive. He didn't have the happiness and laughter that other children had. He only had Uncle Yuenbo by his side. But in the end, Uncle Yuenbo also left him and he became a person. He had been really tired all these years. He hated everyone and even God. Why was it so unfair to him? He tried hard to change everything and take back everything that he had lost. But, in the face of the supreme imperial power, he felt deeply powerless. Maybe in some people's eyes, he was a sign of incompetence. But after so many years he really couldn't hold on any longer. He wasn't a perfect person, and there was no perfect person in the world. He also had a weak side. If it were anyone else, they would have probably collapsed a long time ago after encountering the setbacks and bumps in Qin Feiyang's life. It wasn't easy for him to hold on until now and only admit defeat. Clang! Suddenly, along with a deafening metallic sound, a golden halberd appeared in front of the commander of the invincible Black Army. The halberd was 6 feet long and looked like it was made of gold. The blade of the halberd emitted a piercing light. At this moment, the square fell into a dead silence. Everyone held their breath and looked at the commander of the invincible Black Army. The commander of the invincible Black Army stood behind Qin Feiyang and reached out his hand to grab the halberd. Then he slowly raised it. Grandpa Feiyang can't die. Can you think of a way to save him? Ren Wushuang looked at this scene and tears came out of his eyes. Shuang-er, this is the emperor's order. You can't go against it. The old master sighed. Sigh. Dong Zhongyang and the others also sighed. As the saying goes, even a vicious tiger won't eat its cubs. However, this current emperor was actually ruthless enough to kill his own son. How heartless. It was no wonder that Qin Feiyang hated his father so much. However, there was one person who didn't look worried at all. There was even a faint smile on his face. This person was Lu Xingchen. Brother Qin, isn't it too early to be free now? My plan can't be carried out without you. He muttered to himself and raised his head to look at a restaurant in the east. Mu Qing and the others were standing in front of the window, staring at the central square. Mu Qing also raised her head and looked at Lu Xingchen as if she had sensed his gaze. Chapter 920. Mu Qing showed a relieved smile. At the same time, the atmosphere in the central square had reached an unprecedented tense point. Everyone held their breath and looked at the halberd that was raised high. Under the sunlight, the blade emitted a dazzling light. Finally, noon arrived. Kill! The imperial master lowered his head and uttered a cold word. He was still sitting in the armchair, holding the teacup like a king. He didn't look at Qin Feiyang at all. Cold and ruthless. It was vividly displayed by him. As soon as the imperial master spoke, the commander of the invincible Black Army was filled with killing intent. Clang! The halberd that was raised high suddenly trembled and emitted a deafening metallic sound. It was aimed at Qin Feiyang's neck. In the end, no one can save you. Looking at this scene, Zhuge Mingyang sneered and walked out of the pavilion. Because in his opinion, Qin Feiyang was going to die. There was no need to continue watching. It was not only Zhuge Mingyang. Everyone on scene also thought that way. Qin Feiyang wouldn't have a chance to live when the blade was about to fall. However, everything was out of everyone's expectation. The halberd was about to fall on Qin Feiyang's neck. Everyone could already foresee the tragic scene of Qin Feiyang's head being separated from his body. Boom! But at this moment, a terrifying pressure erupted like a volcano, instantly enveloping the entire central square. Everything was still. The commander of the invincible Black Army stopped moving. The halberd stopped an inch away from Qin Feiyang's neck. At this moment, time seemed to have stopped. Everyone in the central square was still in the same position as before. But the people in the nearby restaurants weren't restrained. What's going on? Zhuge Mingyang, who had just turned around, was shocked and confused. He immediately looked at the central square. This pressure, when he saw the situation in the square, his heart was in turmoil. Even the commander of the invincible Black Army was restrained. Who was it? He scanned his surroundings, looking for the owner of the pressure. In the meantime, all the people in the restaurants near the square were also looking for the owner of the pressure. including Ren Wuxuang and the others. In the end, everyone's gaze was locked onto an old man. It's him, Yiglao. The faces of Ren Wuxuang and the others were instantly filled with ecstasy. Back in the divine prison, they had seen Yiglao and knew how powerful Yiglao was. Although he might not be able to save Qin Feiyang, as long as he was here, Qin Feiyang would definitely not die. However, the others didn't know Yiglao's identity, let alone his strength. At this moment, his face was filled with shock and confusion. They were shocked because of Yiglao's strength and courage. One had to know. Now, the state preceptor was personally overseeing the situation. However, this old man dared to openly release his pressure to prevent the commander of the invincible Black Army from killing Qin Feiyang. This was a blatant provocation. What made them confused was, who was this old man? What did he have to do with Qin Feiyang? Why hadn't they seen or even heard of him before? In the central square, everyone was restrained by Yiglao's pressure, except for Qin Feiyang and the state preceptor. The state preceptor was also a false god, so Yiglao's pressure couldn't restrain him. As for Qin Feiyang, it wasn't that he could ignore Yiglao's pressure, but that Yiglao deliberately didn't restrain him. Alas! A long sigh broke the atmosphere here. Qin Feiyang slowly opened his eyes and raised his head to look at Old Yi and the others. His eyes were filled with complicated emotions. Bastard, why are you looking at me like that? Seeing this, the anger in Mu Qing's heart suddenly flared up. They came all the way here to save this bastard, but he didn't show any gratitude. Instead, he seemed to blame them for being nosy. Qin Feiyang glanced at Mu Qing indifferently. Without saying a word, he turned around and looked at the commander of the invincible Black Army. Although the commander of the invincible Black Army was restrained, his mind was still working. At this moment he was panicking, because Qin Feiyang could move. If Qin Feiyang wanted to kill him now, it would be as easy as stepping on an ant. However, Qin Feiyang didn't kill him. He just glanced at him and then looked away to the halberd above him. The halberd was shining with cold light. It was very sharp. Qin Feiyang reached out his hand and took the halberd from the commander of the invincible Black Army. Then he rubbed the sharp blade. To be honest, I really want to die and be done with it. It's too tiring. You people who have always lived in the imperial capital and lived like princes will never understand how I survived all these years. So I want to be free. But some people don't want me to die. Maybe in their eyes I still have some value. I want to die, but I can't. Do you know how painful it is? But, since I didn't die this time, I have to live well. In the past, those who hurt me, those who betrayed me, I will make them pay the price one by one, Qin Feiyang muttered to himself. Although his voice was very soft, it floated clearly into everyone's ears. Everyone could clearly sense a deep helplessness, a kind of persistence, and a kind of determination in these words. All of a sudden, Qin Feiyang raised his halberd. Boom! His aura suddenly erupted. His black hair and clothes fluttered in the wind. The haze between his eyebrows instantly disappeared and was replaced by a trace of fierceness. He glanced at the crowd around the square and said word by word, "Yes, I, Qin Feiyang, am back. And my return requires blood as a sacrifice." As soon as he finished speaking, his eyes were filled with killing intent. The halberd in his hand suddenly fell and chopped toward the head of the invincible Black Army commander. "You're courting death." But at the same time, the Grand Master's eyes turned cold. He clenched his hand, and the teacup in his hand instantly shattered into pieces. Whoosh! The next moment, he stood up and took a step towards Qin Feiyang. His entire body was overflowing with killing intent. However, Qin Feiyang ignored him. He didn't even look at him. He was still holding the halberd and chopping toward the head of the invincible Black Army commander. Because he believed that someone would stop the Grand Master. The invincible Black Army commander was so anxious that he was about to go crazy. If it was before, it would be impossible for Qin Feiyang to kill him. But now, the invincible Black Army commander was imprisoned by the invincible Black Army commander. Facing Qin Feiyang, who was many times weaker than him, he could only watch the butcher's knife fall. Just as Qin Feiyang had expected. When the Grand Master made his move, Yiglao, who was standing in front of the window, disappeared without a trace. The next moment, He landed on the square in front of the Grandmaster. The Grandmaster had to stop. In the blink of an eye, the halberd fell and suddenly blood gushed out. Along with a desperate scream, the invincible Black Army commander's head fell from his neck and rolled on the ground like a rubber ball. His eyes were wide open and filled with the fear of death. Bang! The headless body also slowly fell to the ground. Blood gushed out from the bull-sized wound and dyed the square red. This place. Once again, the square fell into a dead silence. Looking at the invincible Black Army commander's head, everyone's eyes were filled with horror. Few years ago, this person killed all the princes and almost caused the emperor to lose his bloodline. Now, he killed the invincible Black Army commander without mercy. One must know, the invincible Black Army commander was not only powerful, but he was also a general of the emperor. How could he kill him just like that? In this world, was there anything that this person did not dare to do? Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang. The halberd was still dripping blood. He stood proudly in the middle of the square. His long hair was fluttering in the wind. His 7-chi-tall body was incomparably majestic. He was like the god of war looking down on everyone. Looking at the current Qin Feiyang, everyone's heart was filled with uncontrollable fear. Damn it! Today, none of you will leave the imperial city alive. Commander of the Kirin army, I order you to immediately take your men and kill Qin Feiyang. The Grandmaster was also stunned for a moment. Boom! Suddenly, he shouted loudly. His anger was burning the sky. A terrifying pressure surged forth, forcefully sweeping up Elder Yi and flying towards the clouds. As he soared into the clouds, he ordered the commander of the Qilin army. A battle between fake gods could easily destroy the world. Therefore, they could not fight in the city. Although he was furious to the point of insanity, he still had this bit of rationality. Kill me. Qin Feiyang smiled and turned to look at the commander of the Kirin army. The commander of the Kirin army also hesitated. Seeing this, the Grandmaster was furious and shouted, "What are you waiting for? Do you want to die? You better take care of yourself first." Yiglao sneered and charged at the Grandmaster with full strength. You? The great Qin Empire has stood for 10,000 years. It is not something that you can shake. The Grandmaster laughed angrily. Boom! Crack! The battle between the two false divinities began at the top of the clouds. For a moment, in the sky the wind and clouds surged. Every time the two collided, it was as deafening as thunder. Everywhere they went, the void was shattered. You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.